We kick things off in a mysterious world where we see a couple of girls being taken somewhere in a carriage. They look like they've been taken as slaves but have no idea who's going to be using them. One of the girls is called Sarah and her body is a bit too exposed at this point, so it causes her sister, Rora, some concern. She asks Sarah to cover up, but then they get distracted by the sounds of a dragon flying above them. Even the people riding the carriage show fear in their hearts as they look at the monstrous beast roaring into the endless sky. The girls are a bit confused as to why the dragon has shown up, so they wonder if it is pitying their current state. Anyway, these girls are not the main characters. So we shift to a place in Tokyo, Japan. This looks like an alternate world and an old man shouts at a boy named Ryama, also known as Ryu. It looks like this man is Ryu's sensei and he is challenging him to a deadly battle. He even says that Ryu can have all his wealth if he manages to take his life, and this interests our hero. Tensions run high as the samurai warriors prepare to give it their all in a fight to the finish. With that, an intense battle kicks off, and Ryu manages to pull some impressive moves on his sensei. As a matter of fact, he does so well that he almost manages to stab his sensei's throat. This makes the old man upset and he shouts at Ryu for going all the way. But our hero says that he's only doing what he has been taught. After all, in such a situation, a true samurai would even attack his own parents. The sensei is impressed by his students' moves. But he is the master, so he goes on to show his own moves, all of which are known to be lethal from just one blow. However, Ryu doesn't care about any of this and decides to go all in for this match. However, before we can see the victor of this encounter, we shift to a cute girl named Asuka who is making breakfast for both Ryu and his sensei. She asks the men if they were having fun with each other, but this offends Ryu because he is not the type to have fun with other men. He simply says that he and his sensei were trying to end each other. But Asuka smacks him on the head because she feels he's just trying to joke around. Of course, it looks like she has a thing for Ryu. And the sensei even addresses the elephant in the room by telling Asuka she's like a wife to Ryu. That's when we learn that the sensei is actually Asuka's grandpa. She instantly says that she does not have a lewd relationship with Ryu, but her grandpa thinks that Asuka likes to do roleplay with her lover boy. Of course, this makes things awkward for Asuka, but Ryu looks fine, so the sensei asks him if he has a love rival. He then tells Ryu that he should not spare anyone who tries to get his filthy hands on Asuka's body. As a matter of fact, he shouldn't even hold back from ending their lives if it ever gets to that. This leads to a fiery chat between Ryu and his sensei. But Asuka has had enough of the boys, so she decides to leave for school. It turns out that Ryu is a very popular boy in his own school, because he's very tall and buff. A cute girl comes up to him and asks if he'd like to join the karate club. But our hero says no even though the girl makes a sweet innocent face. She still says that she will wait for Ryu to say yes to her one day. And then we see other kids from the school talk about how strong Ryu is. Every club wants him to join, but our hero can only think about what his sensei told him about striking with intent. This is actually what stops him from joining clubs, because he might just take someone's life by accident if he strikes them with intent. Now, Ryu walks up the stairs and goes to have lunch at the rooftop area. He's gotten a special meal made by Asuka, but he doesn't want her to do so much for him. Ryu takes a bite of his food and once again thinks about how bad it could get for him if he got too excited in the middle of a sparring session. After all, he could end up in jail even if he accidentally ends another person. It's at this very moment that we see a giant circle of energy form around him and zap him away from this world. In a hilarious turn of events, our hero is summoned into another world and is surrounded by a variety of ancient men, all of whom look like they are warrior knights. The men are happy to see the summoning process finally getting success, and they are pleased to find Ryu's body to be big and strong. The wizard who has summoned him is called Gaetsu, and he looks at Ryu with caution because you can't judge a book by its cover. With that, he tells the other men to quickly put a curse on Ryu before it's too late. Our hero has no idea what's going on because he's not in school anymore. What he also notices is an intense intent to attack by one of the men in the room. He doesn't want to take any half chances, so he decides to use the element of surprise. It's at this time when Ryu remembers what his sensei had taught him about showing mercy to an enemy. He then offers some food to the attacking man and completely baffles him. Of course, this is what Ryu wanted in the first place, so he brings out his punches and takes him down with ease. Of course, this is only the beginning of his attacks as he proceeds to grab the soldier's sword and beat him up with it. Our hero puts up an impressive display, despite the fact that he is up against a knight who is wearing armor for protection. However, he can't celebrate just yet, because he gets a sneak attack from behind by another knight. Ryu realizes that he's in a tricky spot, but he doesn't let it get to him and turns around just in time to launch a counter. Ryu is a bit too good for these knights as he gives them a run for their money. His battle skills impress one and all, but the men over here don't want to be dominated by him. As a matter of fact, Gaetsu is the one who is the most upset, and he decides to use his cheat code move to end our hero. He starts chanting a spell and mentions the word thunder, which catches Ryu's attention. Our hero knows that he won't be able to counter thunder by himself, no matter how good he is with a sword. One of the knights attacks him at the same time, and then Geitsu unleashes a finisher move on Ryu. It's an intense attack that gives off a strong visual display, and it looks like Ryu has finally met his end. But then we see that the attacking knight is the one who was struck by lightning. Geitsu realizes that Ryu had used the knight as a shield, and has come out of the attack completely unharmed. Our hero is upset with the way he's being treated, so he launches a punch straight into Geitsu's chest, which damages his right lung and causes him to cough out blood. Geitsu is now completely at Ryu's mercy, so our hero asks him where he is. Geitsu tries to use another spell, but his lung has been damaged, so he can't say a single word. The wizard doesn't want to meet an untimely end, so he tells Ryu that he is currently at the Royal Palace, which is the west of the central continent. Ryu is told that he is in the Ultomia Empire, which makes no sense to him because such a place does not exist on Earth. He asks why he's here, and Geitsu says that he had cast a summoning spell and transported him to the palace. Our hero doesn't believe a single word of his, but Geitsu wonders if Ryu had used his punch to damage his lung on purpose. After all, he can't chant any spells now because of it. Ryu has had enough of these games, so he gives a bright smile and asks Geitsu if he can go back to his original world. However, he gives off a strong killer instinct while doing this, and it makes the wizard even more impressed. Geitsu thinks that he can use Ryu to take over the central continent, but for that, he should have some kind of control over the overpowered fighter. This is a tricky moment for the wizard, and he has never found himself so powerless before. The problem is that he has only managed to perform a successful summoning now, and he has no idea what to do to send our hero back. If he tells Ryu that he can be sent back, then Geitsu will be forced to do it somehow, and his dreams of becoming king shall remain simple dreams. However, if he lies to Ryu now and tells him the truth later, then his life will not be spared. Considering that he is known by so many people in this kingdom, it would make sense for him to not lose his life like this. Geitsu thinks about stalling for time till the other guards arrive, but Ryu doesn't have time for this, so he checks the wizard's pulse. He can sense that Geitsu's heart rate is quite high, so it could mean that he doesn't have a way to send him back home. The wizard is exposed quite easily and admits that he doesn't have the skills to return Ryu to Earth. Geitsu is uneasy at the moment, and prays for his lung to recover just in time for him to cast a spell and get rid of Ryu. Our hero uses his brains and figures that Geitsu had no intention of sending him back alive if he only knew how to summon him here. Ryu wants to know his purpose in this world, and that's when Geitsu explains that people like him have high absorption powers, which is why they are usually summoned. Ryu wants to know what this means, so the wizard explains that humans can absorb the powers of the people they end in this world. The information takes our hero by surprise, but it looks like Geitsu has stalled for enough time and his lung is back to normal now. He can chant again, so he brings out the thunder spell once more. However, Ryu is too quick on his feet and he unleashes one more deadly punch on the wizard. Geitsu is in pretty bad shape now, and Ryu is glad that he's in this world because you can't call this self-defense back on Earth. Meanwhile, we see a cute girl asking the knights to go check up on Geitsu, who happens to be her grandpa. The knights say that the laws forbid them from interfering with the summoning process. After all, it's the most secret out of all the other secret techniques of this world. The cute girl's name is revealed to be Syria, and she maintains that something might have gone wrong because it's taking too much time. The commander of the knights asks Syria to calm down, but she can't afford to have her grandpa fail even once. The knight commander's name is shown to be Rolf, and he asks Syria to get a hold of herself. She finally comes to her senses and says sorry for being so rude and unsightly. However, Rolf says that he is the one being rude because Syria is related to Geitsu by blood, so it's only normal for her to be worried. This is all it takes for Syria to unleash her wild side, and she has no worries because even grand-level magicians make mistakes sometimes. She prepares to use one of her most deadly moves, so Rolf asks his men to stand back if they want to get out of this alive. Without further ado, Syria brings out a flame blast that is so powerful that it manages to damage the entire steel door in front of her. It's an impressive attack, but Rolf knows that a fire blast is not going to be enough to take down a steel door. However, Syria isn't done just yet, and she uses a freeze spell to make the door crumble into little pieces. Rolf is amazed to see this, because it takes a lot of skill to be able to use both fire and ice type spells. With the door finally taken down, Syria tells Rolf that he can now do as he pleases. He orders his men to step forward and check in on Geitsu, and they obey their leader without hesitation. The team enters the hallway and remain cautious in case they come across demons or monsters. What they witness after that is a horrid sight of defeated men and lifeless bodies. Out of these ghastly sights, Syria has to endure the worst one of them all, which is that of her own grandpa. She is in tears and lost for words upon seeing Gaesu's body. But Rolf shifts his focus to a wounded knight who is barely able to speak, since he is still breathing. There is a chance for the soldiers to learn what really happened. However, the knight can only say the word monster, so Rolf orders his men to take him to the infirmary as soon as possible. Rolf tries to assure the man that he is going to live through this, so he doesn't need to say anything for now. However, we soon learn that there's more to the survivor than meets the eye. He smiles right after hearing what Rolf says to him, so it could very well be possible that the survivor is just our hero in disguise. Moving forward, Syria has recovered from the grief of losing Gaesu and starts to use her detective skills. After all, Gaetsu is supposed to be the most powerful wizard in the whole kingdom, so it would take a special kind of monster to take his life. After taking a look at all the other knights, she can see from the autopsy report that they have all been ended by someone who had used his bare hands. She is a bit confused because there is no monster that has hands as far as she knows. On top of that, there is no trace of this beast anywhere in the castle either. Rolf is just as shocked as Sarai, because all the knights that were ended had strong armor on them. It's impossible to believe such a thing, but the autopsy reveals that there are finger marks on the necks of some of the soldiers. Also, some of the bodies had their skulls smashed from behind. So this is a ruthless monster on the loose. Rolf tries to make sense of the whole thing, but even the surviving knight had used the word monster. This causes him to wonder if the human summoned from another world was actually a monster in disguise. This should not be the case though, as humans are supposed to be weak when they first enter this world. There's not much evidence to go by, so Rolf will have to rely on asking the culprit for the answers when he ends up catching him. His thoughts are put on hold when one of the knights comes charging into the room, citing an emergency. Rolf asks him what's wrong, and learns that the infirmary has been damaged all of a sudden. It turns out that someone has set fire to the infirmary, and then we see a young man taking a look at some flowers in the garden. He is pleased by the beauty of nature, but then he also notices that the infirmary is on fire. The knights panic and try to look for a magician to help them with the situation. That's when the young man unleashes his powers and uses a water storm attack to take care of the fire. His skills are quite impressive and his name is revealed to be Orlando, as is said by Sarai when she and Rolf reach the scene of the crime. Sarai demands to know what has gone down, but Orlando says that even he just got here and was able to stop the fire. She doesn't care for things that she can also figure out by herself, and this puts Orlando in a tricky spot. Syria is fiery as ever, but Orlando manages to convince her that he does not know much about anything. She proceeds to ask him if he knows anything about the surviving knight who was being taken to the infirmary. Orlando is clueless as usual, so she decides to shift her focus to the imperial doctor, who is called Ronbelt. He says that the soldier did arrive at the infirmary, but he is not what the others had believed him to be. As a matter of fact, he ended up taking the life of his son Aaron as well. Dr. Ronbelt takes a sip of booze and proceeds to narrate what went down in the infirmary. We are taken to a quick flashback where we see the injured knight being brought to Aaron by another knight. He needs to be treated quickly, so Aaron rushes to his dad to help with the patient. However, Ronbelt is only interested in drinking from his bottle, so he leaves the whole thing on Aaron. The young doctor is shocked to see his own father being so useless, but you can't expect much from a man who loves drinking. With that, Aaron decides to get to work and he asks the knight to remove the patient's armor. However, this is where it all goes wrong for him as the patient suddenly wakes up and stabs the knight with a hidden weapon. Aaron is shocked to see this, and he tries to escape while also crying out for help. Unfortunately for him, the patient catches him from behind and starts to choke him while he continues to call out to the others. It's no surprise that the patient is actually Ryu, who has managed to pull a fast one on Rolf and Syria. Aaron begs Ryu to let him go, so our hero apologizes for his behavior, but also asks from where he can escape. Aaron is a bit confused and continues to struggle, but he's no match for Ryu, who has already absorbed the powers of the people he has ended in this world. With no other option, Aaron gives Ryu an escape route, but then our hero snaps his neck because he can't risk Aaron revealing his location to the others. After all, he believes that he's only been summoned here to be a slave. After he's done with Aaron, Ryu checks out all the medical supplies and decides to start a fire, which led to the eventual explosion. We're back to the present now, where Dr. Ronbelt tells Syria and Rolf that they need to catch the culprit as soon as they can before he gets away. Syria wants to act fast, so she orders Orlando to start chanting his magic, and also asks Rolf to gather his men. Of course, Orlando has no clue what she wants him to do, so Syria gets annoyed with him. Dr. Ronbelt tells Orlando that he should do as she says, because it's the only way they're going to be able to catch the culprit. Orlando agrees to this and asks Syria how much power he should put in. She says that he should give it all he's got because this monster is a lot tougher than all of them combined. Orlando gets the message and decides to use his special skill of teleportation. He is able to teleport instantly, which impresses Dr. Ronbelt. However, Orlando is the third-ranked magician and used to be a student of Gaesu, so Syria expects nothing less from him. Now, Syria tells Rolf that she will teleport him to the barracks so that he can get his men ready. He is fine with this, but also tells her that she will need to sort out the permission from the king himself. This actually reminds Syria that she needs to meet the king to discuss the monster, so she asks Dr. Ronbelt to take care of everything over here for now. He's fine with it, so she summons a portal and goes on her way, after which Ronbelt just sits on the floor to drink his sorrows away. He did just lose his son, so in this case, he is allowed to use the bottle. Meanwhile, Syria teleports to the royal guard and shocks the knights standing in front of the throne room. They tell her that she will lose her life for using this magic in the royal castle, but Syria doesn't care for any of that and shows her face to the guards. They recognize her instantly, and she says that she needs to meet the king urgently. The guards want to know why she wants to see him, but this only makes Syria angry, and she orders the guards to do as she says if they don't want her to use fire magic to destroy the door. The guards don't take any chances and open the door for Syria, which leads to the king, who has his chancellor Doltnest next to him. It's obviously a serious matter, but Doltnest scolds Syria for not showing the proper respect to his majesty. He also wonders why the first-ranked magician is not here if the matter is so urgent. He is ready to scold Syria some more, but then the king tells him to stop being rude. Doltnest tries to justify his rudeness by saying Syria had to put up such a show just to get an audience with the king. But he has had enough of the chancellor, so he tells him to keep silent. The king's name is Wionel Isenheart, and he is also known as the Lion Emperor. Doltnest knows his position, so he says sorry for his rudeness and keeps his mouth shut. With that, the king allows Syria to speak, and she says that she needs to take command of the royal guard. Doltnest can't believe what he's hearing, so he tries to mock Syria once again, but King Isenheart is fine with it as long as she can convince him that she deserves it. Doltnest is at a loss for words. But the king also asks for Gaetsu because he is not here. That's when Syria reveals that her grandpa has been murdered and is no longer with us. Before we can check the reactions of the king and Doltnest, we move to our hero Ryu, who thinks back to how Gaetsu was looking at him with shady eyes. Something was clearly wrong with Gaetsu's intentions of summoning Ryu to this world. But Hiro doesn't have time for this, so he tries to get out of the castle by dressing up as one of the knights. We move to a brief flashback where we get to see more of what Ryu had spoken to Gaetsu about. Our hero needed more clarity on why humans like himself are brought to this world so often, especially because they're not always good with swords and spears. That's when Gaetsu had said that humans possess the ability to become the ultimate warriors in this world. This is due to their ability to absorb the powers of the people they end. But it's a different kind of logic. Basically, in order to gain the strength of one human, our hero would have to get rid of 1,000 humans. Similarly, if he were to gain the strength of one dragon, then he would need to finish off 100 dragons. So, even though Ryu had taken care of the knights in the dungeon, he has not gained all their powers because he will need to end many more such humans. We're back to the present now, where Ryu is considering what to do with his new knowledge. The idea of becoming as strong as a dragon is very appealing. But the main issue here is that Ryu is indeed in another world and not his own. He is a bit sad after coming to terms with his new reality because he is no longer with his sensei or Asuka. On top of that, he is a wanted man here, which means that everyone is on the lookout for him. Luckily, Ryu is a smart man, as he had dumped the armor he stole earlier outside the city. He is sitting and eating lunch inside the city now, which is a good idea because the soldiers will simply assume that he has tried to escape. Ryu had also stolen money from the knights he ended, and was able to buy new clothes with it, which means that his school uniform also won't stand out. However, he has no idea what to do because he has never been in an alternate world before. In order to cheer him up, a lady drops by and says that she hasn't seen him here before. She wonders if he's a traveler and then gives him a whole bunch of beer. Ryu is shocked to see beer in this world, but tells the lady that he hasn't ordered for any. Regardless, the woman wants to treat him because she is now on his break and Ryu looks like a drinker. Our hero is a little embarrassed as he knows that he's only 16 years old, but it's fine for him because he looks a lot older than his age. He thanks the woman for his treat and is called a good guy. Ryu wants to know why he's being termed as one, and the lady says that it's simply because of the polite words he's using. The woman proceeds to make small talk with our hero by asking him if it's his first time in the capital city. Ryu says yes and adds a little drama by saying his parents had passed away suddenly due to an illness. The woman becomes mindful and shares her condolences with our hero, who goes on to tell her that he's thinking of living here. Ryu asks if there are any jobs that he can take up over here, and also mentions that he's quite skilled with a sword. The lady starts thinking and instantly says that being a blacksmith will be of no use since he is too old for that. Ryu realizes that age is a huge factor in getting jobs here, so he asks if he can become a merchant. That does sound like a good idea, but the woman says that he will have to start out as an apprentice. Ryu has no wish to be someone else's assistant because he only answers to his sensei, with no other options in mind. The woman says that Ryu can become a mercenary or an adventurer if he's so good with a sword. This sounds interesting to Ryu, so he asks the lady for more details. She's a bit surprised that Ryu doesn't know anything about adventures, so he manages to guide the topic in the right way and ask for further clarity. That's when he learns that he can easily become an adventurer by signing up at the guild and the bank. Both these places are very close to the bar, and they don't even ask for ID, so it will be a piece of cake. With that, Ryu is ready to embark on a new journey, and the woman says that he can drop by to talk anytime he likes, because this place becomes the guild's local tavern at night. Now, our hero rushes to the guild and says that he's looking for a job. The girl at the reception asks for his bank card, and we see that Ryu has already gotten that process done. However, when she looks at the card, it says that he's 16 years old. This is obviously a shock for her because Ryu is way too big to be of that age. However, this makes Ryu feel bad as well, and the girl says sorry for being rude. He says it's okay, but his body language says a whole other story. After a hilarious moment, the reception girl tells Ryu about the guild and how it works. She says that there are various sections of the guild across the continent, and adventurers are measured by rank and level. Rank can be decided based on the achievements, and levels can be decided by the strength and power of the adventurer. Now, the girl asks Ryu if he knows about absorbing strength, and he gives her the same explanation that Geitsu had told him. She proceeds to say that the level represents the number of people whose strength he has absorbed. Usually, people need to absorb strength to reach higher levels, but there has been one person who was able to reach level 7 using only his own strength. Ryu wonders why it's only level 7 and not more, but the girl tells him that he shouldn't worry about such things because he's new to all of this. Now, the girl gives him an explanation on the battle quests. He can earn up to 3 copper coins for simple quests like taking down a bee monster or a dog. For the same thing, he will also gain 1 rank for each successful quest. There are also travel missions where he might be asked to escort certain people to certain places. Ryu is an F-rank adventurer right now, so he can take missions that go to nearby towns. As a matter of fact, he can actually choose a mission that will take him to Murph Island in the east. This is a great chance for our hero to make his way out of the city, because he's a wanted man and doesn't want to attract any attention. The exit point is close to the south of the border, so he decides to go ahead with this mission. In order to keep himself ready for action, he needs to pick up a sword, so he goes to a weapons shop. However, this world doesn't have any katanas, so he'll have to make do with a long sword for now. We are now taken to a flashback where the woman from the bar asks Ryu if he even has a weapon, but Ryu says that his bare hands are more than enough. She thinks it's a very dumb thing for Ryu to say, and she mentions that adventurers don't usually lose their lives to larger monsters. It's easy to run away from them, but it's the weaker monsters that usually end up taking lives because the adventurers are too careless with them. She maintains that Ryu will never be able to deduce what's going to happen to him outside this city, so he should be careful. At this very moment, a man at the bar tells the lady that she should retire because he's going to buy the place soon. We're back to the present now, and we see Ryu still thinking about what to do with the sword. He asks the shop owner if he can help him with a handy weapon, because he does not know anything about the swords of this world. The shop owner takes offense to this and says that he does not have any such weapon. He even tries to act high and mighty with Ryu, but our hero keeps his cool and mentions that the lady at the bar had asked him to come here. This changes the man's tone almost instantly, and then he confirms that Ryu is a new warrior. As expected, he is shocked because Ryu does not look like a young person, so the shop owner wonders what he's been doing with his life all this time. Our hero explains that he's just joined the guild today, but thinks about how his age and appearance are going to cause him problems moving ahead. The shop owner tells him to wait for now, but also stresses on not calling his weapons handy or suitable. He comes back with a dagger, and Ryu likes what he sees. He is also able to identify that the dagger has been made with a formula, and it shocks the shop owner. He did not think that Ryu would be able to spot that, but our hero says that such daggers are hard to break even if they are made with cheaper material. Ryu finally looks like he's getting somewhere, but the shop owner acts shady and even calls him a young man due to his keen sense of vision. Of course, Ryu is puzzled by this behavior, so he asks the shop owner if he has a single-edged sword with a curved blade. He instantly recognizes it as a katana and even says that it's a weapon from another world. Ryu gets hopeful and asks him if he actually has one, but the man says that he does not know how to make katanas. He does realize that Ryu does not want the weapons from this world, so he takes him to his secret room where he has all kinds of weapons from other worlds. Ryu is impressed by this collection as it includes nunchucks, side daggers, tonfa, and the 3-section staff. Our hero has a hard time using them, which makes the shop owner upset. Ryu reassures him that he does know how to use these weapons, but not like an expert. Other weapons include the gabishi, friction lock baton, and even the chakaram from ancient India. Ryu tries out some of the weapons and is able to use them with ease, which impresses the shop owner. However, he is not getting the right feel of them, so he tries out some more. By the end of it all, he decides to take a couple of weapons and the sword as well. However, he only intends to use the sword for now because it's his best bet. With everything set now, he returns to the bar and is greeted by the lady. She is glad to see that Ryu has managed to find himself a nice weapon. And then she asks him if he's received the quest letter. Ryu doesn't know what she's talking about, so the lady explains that he's supposed to get one from the guild. It causes our hero to panic, because he doesn't have one on him at this moment. Now, a man shows up from behind and asks the lady about Ryu, so she tells him what happened with the quest letter. The man says that it's fine, and he can just get the letter from the cute reception girl the next day. Ryu realizes his mistake and thanks the man for his kindness. He says it's nothing and proceeds to tell the entire bar that Ryu is a new guy over here. He raises a toast to our hero and tells everyone to be nice to him as well. A merry night follows, and then we see Ryu chilling at an inn. He has managed to get himself a room, and thanks his quick thinking regarding the change of clothes, this has allowed him to settle into the town while the situation at the royal castle also calms down. He even remembers a moment when some girl guards went past him without realizing that he could be the culprit behind the massacre of the knights. However, this does not mean that he should take things lightly, and that's exactly why he's chosen his latest mission as well. He considers Rolf to be a strong fighter and knows that Syria can use all kinds of magic. Orlando is also a decent fighter, but the one person on Ryu's mind is Syria. He says it's because he could sense the passion in her body when she had seen her dead grandpa. Of course, she has the most motivation to find him, which is why Ryu considers her to be like the queen in a game of chess. There's no point in thinking this much, so Ryu decides to get some rest for now. Now, we move to the Royal Guard, which is commanded by the king's daughter, Shaldana. She gets to take the lead because she is a princess, but one of the knights asks her if it makes sense to go on such a wild goose chase. After all, they don't even know what Ryu looks like, so it makes the knight wonder if Shaldana has some special information. She simply smiles at him and says that it's fine even if she doesn't know what our hero looks like. For some reason, it seems as if she can sense him and will be able to figure it out once he's in front of her. Shaldana is very measured in her calculations, but Syria doesn't agree with her ways. First of all, she's upset because Shaldana is calling off the search till next morning. The princess reasons that it's late at night now, so it could be dangerous for them to continue this way. However, Syria says that causing such a delay will only allow the culprit to get away. Shaldana doesn't have the time to argue with Syria, so she asks Orlando to take her away for now. He does as she says and picks up Syria in a romantic manner. Syria starts blushing and asks Orlando to put her down, but he can't do it because his intrusive thoughts have taken over. He teleports them away from the scene. And then Rolf asks Shaldana for her next plan of action. She says that she will head east and Rolf's men can go to the south to look for Ryu. Rolf isn't too sure about Shaldana going to the east because the border is closest to the south. The princess agrees with him, but for some reason, she is getting a gut feeling about the east. Basically, there are quite a few reasons for the culprit to head to the east, and her hunch is just one of them. Rolf still has concerns about Shaldana's decision, but she has Sadu with her, who is the same person that had questioned her information earlier. He happens to be a standout fighter and she wants to have him as her assistant because he's good from the rear side. Shaldana and Rolf think about mobilizing some forces, but the problem is that they can still get attacked from an enemy force known as Zaryuta. Also, it was quite lucky for them after Gaetsu's passing because usually, the nobles would rebel in such a situation. This is exactly why the two of them decide not to waste the few choices they have to make. While Rolf and Shaldana discuss more battle plans, we see our hero trying out his new weapons on a bunch of fierce wolves. He uses the chakra weapons from India and is able to use them with ease. The wolves attack him as a pack, so Ryu takes out his sword and does the damage. By the end of it all, our hero has been able to take down over 50 wild wolves, 30 wild bees, and almost 40 wild rabbits. It's quite a lot for someone who is just starting out. But Ryu is unbothered, as he presents the bounty to the cute reception girl at Murph Island. She comments that Ryu has outdone himself, but he says that his sword has gotten dull due to his attacks. He wants to sharpen his weapon, but the girl is more surprised to hear that he hunted down all these beasts in just one day. She had thought he was a magician with a strong destructive power, but it turns out that he's just a strong man in general. Ryu gets himself a nice reward for all his hard work, and he calculates the value of the money based on how much he would normally spend on lunch. He comes to the conclusion that he has made over 40,000 yen, so it's a nice bounty. The girl also tells him that he's gone up to WF rank due to his mission. Ryu looks surprised that he's grown so quickly, and the girl wonders if he's not too happy about it. Our hero clears the confusion, And then the girl says that he will now get double the reward since he has ranked up. She is confident that he will continue to succeed because he is very talented from the looks of it. The girl continues to tempt Ryu to take on more missions and also talks to him in a seductive way. Our hero is about to let his intrusive thoughts take over, but before he loses control, he remembers what the lady at the bar told him about being careful. He realizes that he should not try to act too confident, so he asks the reception girl for a healing potion. However, she says that healing potions made by magic are very expensive, starting at 10 gold coins for one. That translates to 1,000,000 yen, which is a bit silly for just one bottle. Being injured in this world is a tricky thing, so Ryu decides to buy the potion just in case of an emergency. Since there is no insurance either, he chooses to buy one more sword as well. However, before he can complete his train of thought, he can hear an angry customer on the other counter of the guild. He seems to be upset with his reward and is arguing with the guild man over it. He believes that he should be getting a higher reward for taking down a robber, especially because he risked his life to get the job done. However, the guildman tells him that he might be a first-rank swordsman but is still a third-rank adventurer. This person's name is Gories, and he was able to defeat a robber, but this was not from the list of Red Moon bandits who had the bounty on their heads. What's more is that while Gories was wasting his time with a useless robber, the Red Moon bandits ended up raiding a nearby village. It so happens that some young innocent girls were also captured due to this. So Gories feels horrible about the whole thing. He confirms that if he had gone for the Red Moon bandits, then those girls would not be captured. The guildman does not want to give a clear answer but does say that it would have been better if Gories had gone for the right target, fearing that those innocent girls will be sold as slaves to creepy men. Gories admits his mistake and tells the guildman to charge him a penalty for his actions. Ryu is confused by this interaction, but the reception girl tells him that such things happen all the time. Ryu calls Gories' quest a failure, and the guild girl says that the most important duty of an adventurer is to investigate what he's doing. After all, a failed quest could lead to horrible futures for innocent people, and that's exactly what has happened with Gories, even though he has a kind heart. With this information, Ryu sets out on his journey and admits that his thinking was a bit shallow at first. It turns out that this world is not like a game where he can casually just fail quests. There are consequences to his actions, so he needs to be a better man. Now, he checks the directions on the map and finds that the town arrow should be nearby if he keeps heading east. He can't see any of the Red Moon bandits either, but suddenly an eerie sensation hits him. We shift to the bandits who are talking about their recent bounty, which includes 300 gold coins. On top of that, they have also scored some pretty girls, and we learn that it's Sarah and her sister Rora, whom we had seen earlier. The shameless men want to have some fun with their new slaves, but one of them is worried about the boss finding out. The men eventually figure that they don't need to tell the boss about these two slave girls, and they can just get rid of them once they're done violating them. This is when we realize that the previous master of these girls simply chose to run away at that time when we last saw them with the dragon. Ryu has reached the scene and he has identified these men as his new targets. The girls try to resist the bandits by saying they'll just bite their tongues if the men touch them. However, they are wearing slave collars, which means that they can't fight back against these shady goons. The bandits soak in this moment and decide to have their way with the slave girls. They even choose who gets to violate which girl based on their hair color. Ryu has had just about enough of this, and he can't contain his rage any longer, especially after seeing how shameless these bandits are. Sarah and her sister brace themselves for a horror show, but then the attacking goons get attacked out of thin air. The girls are confused to see this, and then we see our hero pulling out some of his best moves with his sword. The bandits are confused as to who this man is, and they try to scare him by saying they're a dangerous gang. However, Ryu doesn't care for shallow words, and even drops his sword to the ground. He proceeds to give the goons the thrashing of a lifetime by first using his fists, and then he decides to use his collection of weapons as well. None of the bandits are any match for Ryu, as he manages to take them down with ease. Sarah and her sister watch on as our hero defends their honor in brutal fashion. After a brief fight, Ryu emerges the victor and then asks the girls if they're alright. Of course, his raw power is more than enough to take their breath away, so they stare at him with a sense of wonder. Ryu frees the girls and proceeds to pick up his sword after realizing that he successfully rescued them. Rora takes this chance to wipe his cheek because he's bleeding from a slight cut. Ryu maintains that he's fine. And then he gets a formal introduction from Sarah and Rora. They turn out to be twins, so it's like a dream come true for Ryu. But he keeps his emotions in check and confirms if the girls are healthy and fine. They thank him for saving them from a horrid experience. But our hero refuses to accept their gratitude. He confesses that he had waited for the enemies to drop their weapons and even pull down their pants. He could have struck earlier, but wanted to be careful, which is why he caused the girls some discomfort. Sarah and Rora are fine with it, and are just thankful to be free, so they don't mind what Ryu did for them. After all, This was only to ensure that he could save them for sure. Now, our hero takes a good look at the twin girls and notices that they have very curvy bodies and cute faces. His intrusive thoughts start to take over, but the girls ask him if anything is wrong, so he snaps back to his senses. He seems to like their outfits because they look like belly dancers. But what's even more prominent is the fact that they have slave collars and shackles. He asks them for their full names, but the girls say that slaves don't have them. The girls ask him for his name, and he introduces himself formally, after which he offers to take the girls to Eru. However, the girls say that they can't move from here unless their master allows them to do so. Ryu is baffled by this, but the girls are actually being serious, so there's not much he can do about it. He offers to find their master for them, but the girls reveal that he had run away when the bandits had shown up. This only makes things more difficult for Ryu, but the girls maintain that they can't do anything unless their master tells them to. He wants to help these girls and be done with the whole mess, because he does have Shaldana and the others chasing after him. He tells the girls that there's no telling what kind of monster can show up in the night, so he's going to clean up the bodies for now. He says that he will be leaving after that, and the girls are ready to say goodbye to him. Ryu goes on his merry way, but he wonders if he could have done more for the slave girls. He quickly realizes a big mistake he made with the goons, as one of them has survived his blows. The bandit says that he recognizes Ryu's face now, and will make sure to end him when he comes back with his other goons. What's even worse is that he has kidnapped Sarah and is taking her away on his horse. Rora is left behind and she calls out to her sister, but it's too late as the bandit has managed to escape on his horse. Ryu can't do anything about this because he's not as fast as a horse. He uses the healing potion to regain his strength, and then he rushes to Rora, who then asks him if he is willing to cut a small wound on his left hand's pinky finger. Our hero is confused, but there isn't much time, so he has to act fast. Ryu cuts his finger and then Rora starts praying to her god. Our hero feels something odd about her, because she clearly has a lot to offer than just her body. Now, Rora offers Ryu's blood as an offering and forms a contract with him, thus making her his slave now. With that, her collars and shackles break and she is truly freed from her previous master. Rora apologizes for using her powers, but also refers to Ryu as her master, which makes him a bit awkward. She then seeks permission to use her magic and gains approval from Ryu. After that, Rora proceeds to call upon the power of the wind and she launches an attack on the bandit who is running away with Sarah. That's when we learn that Rora is a magician, just like Geitsu, and her powers are quite impressive. She uses a wind/attack on the goon, and it eventually manages to knock him down with his horse. Now that the villain has been taken down, Rora offers her hand to Ryu and says that they can go rescue Sarah. Our hero feels it will take some time because the bandit has gone quite ahead of them. But this is no problem for Rora, as she uses her wind powers once again to help them travel in lightning quick time. Ryu is amazed by Rora's powers, and they reach Sarah in an instant. With the danger averted, Rora hugs Sarah with joyful tears and the sisters are happily reunited. Ryu is still trying to understand how he was able to travel so much distance in just 1 second, and he learns that it's wind magic. Rora is a bit surprised that Ryu doesn't know about magic, especially if he is so good at martial arts. Our hero is aware that magic exists in this world, but is unsure if he should lie or tell the truth to these girls. Rora looks after Sarah while Ryu asks about the bandit. It turns out that his legs are stuck under the horse, so he can't move at all. Ryu wants to get rid of him, but wants to ask the girls first for their opinion. After all, they were the ones who had to endure the most pain under this creep. Rora and Sarah simply say that they are fine with whatever Ryu chooses, because he is their new master. Ryu is a bit taken aback to hear this, but it's true that he now has 2 beautiful slave girls to serve all his needs. He must maintain his focus and get rid of the bandit who tried to create a mess in the first place. He walks up to him with his deadly sword and scares the daylights out of the goon. The villain begs Ryu to stay away from him, so our hero holds off his attack for now. The bandit then goes on to say that he can offer Ryu anything he wants, whether it's money or even girls as cute as Sarah and Rora. His offer slowly turns into a threat as he explains that the Red Moon Bandits have as many as 100 members in their gang. On top of that, they are also a part of the Zaryuta army, which means that Ryu shouldn't try anything risky. Of course, Ryu is a man of reason, so he mocks the bandit for not using his brains. He says that Zaryuta will only know that Ryu was the one who did this if the bandit actually survives right now. It's obvious that our hero is not going to let this goon out of here alive, because he needs to keep his identity a secret. After all, the dead can't talk to their masters even if they want to. Realizing that he has no other option, the bandit tries the emotional route by saying he has a daughter. Sadly for him, Ryu does not care about such logic and swiftly ends his life with his sword. Both Sarah and Rora are a bit shocked to see such a ruthless side to their new master, and it makes Ryu a little conscious. He asks his new slave girls if they have an issue with the way he dealt justice, so they say that Ryu could have tried to get more information out of the bandit. However, our hero says that the girls shouldn't believe everything they hear. For all they know, the goon could have been bluffing just to strike fear into their hearts. Anyway, Ryu is glad that Sarah and Rora are back together, and he is thanked for his duties. They refer to Ryu as master, and he asks them why they keep doing that. Rora explains that she is now his slave because of the blood oath they just formed. Ryu can't believe his luck because he's got a cute babe at his service, and it only gets better when Sarah also asks him to form a blood oath with her. Rora also begs her master to do the same thing with her sister, but Ryu needs a moment to calm down. He can't let his intrusive thoughts win just yet, so he asks Rora to stop calling him master. He also says that the girls don't need to serve him, but this only makes them upset because they think that Ryu doesn't like them. This is a tricky spot for our hero, and he tries to calm the girls down. Rora is confused by his words, so Ryu tries to change the topic. He asks the girls about their previous master, but Rora says that she doesn't need to serve him anymore. She has been freed of her previous contract, and now she will only obey Ryu. However, Sarah is still bound by the old master's curse, so she can't move till Ryu forms a blood oath with her. Our hero figures that Sarah won't be able to do anything unless he forms the blood oath ritual, so he agrees to it. Of course, he also wants an explanation about everything because it's already late. The girls agree to tell him what he needs to know after they reach the town of Era. However, before they move ahead, the trio decides to go back to the carriage to collect any useful materials that might have been left behind. In a surprising turn of events, they find someone else at the carriage, and he is shown to be a rather large person. He takes a look at Rora and Sarah with menacing eyes and looks happy to see them. He even greets them by their names and asks if they're all right. Basically, this man is their previous master, and he is glad to see his slaves in top condition. He does express some concern because he fears that the bandits might have had their way with his slaves. As a matter of fact, he only cares about this because the girls will not be able to fetch a high price if they were forced to do loot things with a bunch of bandits. The fat man acts shady with the girls, so Rora has no choice but to give him a nice slap. Of course, the fat man is shocked by this behavior, and to make things even more confusing for him, Rora threatens to stab him if he dares to come any closer. The fat man gets angry and he starts insulting the girls with all kinds of hateful words. He eventually reveals to Ryu that he is their master, but Rora corrects him by stating that he used to be their master. Ryu asks Rora if the fat man is their enemy, and she says that he was never their ally. Our hero gets the message and proceeds to walk towards the fat man. He tells him not to behave like a fool and orders him to get lost. However, the fat man simply thinks that Ryu is trying to act like Prince Charming. He likes Ryu's body and says that he can use him as a labor slave, but Ryu does not bow down to anyone. He sends a chakra flying into the fat man's head and is about to finish him with a couple more strikes. However, both Sarah and Rora charge at the fat man and stab him without mercy. They are so savage that they continue to make the fat man bleed till he drops to the ground without any life or soul left in his body. Ryu is rather amazed to see such hatred from the girls, but it makes sense because they must have had to go through unspeakable acts during their time as slaves. Ryu wants to ask the girls a lot of questions, but he decides to save them till they reach Eru. The girls agree to tell him whatever he wants, but the sadness in their eyes tell a million stories already. With both Rora and Sarah liberated, Ryu believes that his mission to save the girls was a success. Unfortunately for him, he has now gotten himself into a much larger mess by making the both of them his new slaves. The three of them manage to find themselves an inn, and the girls take a quick bath to clean their curvy bodies. They take some time to get ready, so they apologize to Ryu for making him wait. Our hero has no issues with their timing, and instead, he asks them to sit down so that they can have their meal together. However, the girls tell him that slaves can't eat at the same table as their master. On top of that, we see that both Sarah and Rora are in their towels, which means that one wrong step could end up showing Ryu what he's always wanted to see. Sarah and Rora both stand there looking at Ryu, who has no idea what to do now that he has two slave girls in front of him with no clothes on. Before he can unleash the beast within, our hero notices an odd look in the eyes of the girls. He then remembers that slaves will have to obey their master's commands, no matter what. After confirming this with both Rora and Sarah, Ryu orders them to sit down and eat dinner with him. The girls are shocked by his kindness, but our hero remembers the time he would eat with his sensei and Asuka back on Earth. After all, eating alone makes the food taste bad, so it only makes sense to eat with two cute girls. Rora and Sarah obey their master and get dressed before sitting down with him. Both of them are a little awkward, so Ryu doesn't know what to say to them. Luckily, he realizes that he needs to confirm a few things with the girls before going ahead. Essentially, Rora and Sarah are also his battle slaves now, and since they have magic powers, Ryu can breathe a little easy. Of course, he needs a little explanation first, so Rora says that battle slaves are just like body slaves and labor slaves. They can fight for their master, and their powers are usually sealed so that they don't rebel. This means that Rora and Sarah can only use their powers if Ryu gives them the permission to do so. However, our hero doesn't understand the meaning of this because Rora was able to form a blood oath with him without her master's presence. There's no point in sealing a slave's powers if they can freely change masters whenever they wish. Ryu makes a lot of sense, and Sarah tries to explain this, but Rora tells her to take it easy. She decides to tell Ryu the truth about their identity and reveals that her real name is Rora Malphus. This family has been known to serve as royal knights for the kingdom near the west coast of the central continent. This essentially makes both Rora and Sarah nobles, and things start to make a lot more sense to Ryu. Of course, the girls beg him to keep this a secret. And then Rora decides to take Ryu to a flashback from 5 years ago. A war had broken out, and after a lot of hardships, Rora's kingdom had finally collapsed. With no other option, she and Sarah decided to escape on a boat which was supposed to provide them safe passage. However, the girls were betrayed by their own guard, who ended up selling them to a slave trader named Izasu. He happens to be the same fat man whom they had met earlier. And then Rora becomes a little emotional. She is clearly upset about the way she and her sister were betrayed, and she blames humans for not being able to resist temptation. Of course, they have a prime example in Ryu himself, who is fighting a lot of temptation to make use of his new slave girls. Anyway, our hero explains to Rora that the guard might have sold them off to keep his life, so not much could have been done about that. It turns out that Rora and Sarah have also learned everything about battle slaves from Izasu before they took him down. When it comes to forming blood oaths, this was something their father had taught them when they were kids because he knew it would come in handy later. Ryu puts his mind to work and wonders if Rora's and Sarah's dad had actually anticipated them becoming slaves. He soon finds his answer and tells the girls that the reason they were taught this ritual was to use it in order to escape slavery when the right man would come along. This explains how the girls were able to make Ryu their new master. Rora and Sarah are amazed by Ryu's intelligence and tell him that he is the man they've been waiting for their whole lives. Our hero figures out the scene and offers to set the girls free. He even has the money that Izasu was carrying with him, so it's more than enough for the girls to start a new life. However, Sarah and Rora don't want to leave their master and say that they can even give their lives for him. After all, he did protect them from the bandits even when he was all alone by himself. Ryu is not impressed and tells the girls that he has his own issues to deal with. He can't afford to have the added stress of 2 slave girls with him, so that's when Rora decides to say something interesting. She asks Ryu if his worries have something to do with the fact that he is a boy from another world. Our hero is shocked to hear this, but he gives a neutral pose because he doesn't want to give away his position. Both Sarah and Rora point out that he's extremely strong, but has no idea about magic or blood oaths, since he was able to become their master so easily. The girls already suspected something, but now they have their answers. Ryu has nowhere else to go, so he finally confesses that he is indeed from another world. Seeing that the girls trust him with their lives, he goes on to reveal that he was brought to this world by Gaetsu. He's been on the run since then, but the good thing is that nobody knows what he looks like. Ryu proceeds to tell the girls that he can't have them as slaves because that will only slow him down. He does have a lot to deal with, so the girls suggest that they can keep him safe if the royal guard were to catch up to him. However, Ryu maintains that he can't have slaves, probably because his intrusive thoughts would take over. He says that the girls can only follow him of their own free will, but this doesn't go the way he had planned, because the girls think of it as an order. They bow down to Ryu, so he asks them to think about the situation for a moment. He states that he will have to return to his own world at some point, so the girls need to be free when that happens. Rora simply says that she and Sarah will be happy to serve him until the time comes. Suddenly, the girls think of a way to convince Ryu to take them with him to Earth and start celebrating like cute little kids. Of course, Ryu doesn't find anything cute about this because he has Asuka to deal with back home. Our hero can already imagine what it's going to be like if he were to come back with 2 curvy girls. He sees Asuka being happy to see him safe and sound, but losing her mind when she sees Sarah and Rora announcing themselves as his slave girls. He can also picture his sensei being impressed by his flirting skills, but the main point is that Asuka will not spare his life. Our hero suddenly wakes up and realizes that this was all a dream. He takes a look at the girls sleeping next to him and figures that he's better off with them, because it will help avoid suspicion. After all, having slave girls does come with its own set of benefits. His primary target is to cross the border, so he must not let himself get carried away. The next day, he goes to the guild to sell the slave jewelry that the girls were wearing. It so happens that Ryu has hit the jackpot, because he has offered 3,000 gold coins for them. Ryu can't believe what he's hearing, and the reception girl assumes that he's not happy with the reward money being offered to him. She explains that 3,000 gold coins is the best that they can offer him if he wants to sell all the jewelry together. Of course, Ryu is more than happy to take this amount, so he tells the reception girl that he'll take the money. However, he can see a shady smile on her face, which means that he has been tricked into selling his treasure for a cheap price. However, what is done cannot be undone, so he takes his money and heads out of the guild. He reveals that he managed to sneak 2 rings into his pocket while exchanging the treasure, and he gives these jewels to the girls. Now, the trio decides to cross the border, but they have come across some troubling news. Princess Shaldana has reached the city, and she has put border patrol all across the area. Ryu knows that it would have been easier if it was just a simple blockade, because he could have just bribed someone and gotten over with it. However, with the princess herself over here, he won't be able to use that option. Rora and Sarah believe that going against the princess could lead to the worst possible sentence, because it's treason against the country. However, there could also be a catch to this, so Rora suggests being careful with their movements. Of course, just staying in one place won't make much sense either because they're being hunted at this point. Ryu puts his brain to work once again and tries to figure another route for him and the girls. Since the eastern border is blocked, the only other option is the town's main route. This will enable them to escape through the northern forest. But then again, this could be exactly what the princess would want our hero to do. He tries to put himself in her shoes, and starts to think of various counterattacks that he could utilize. After all his consideration, Ryu theorizes that there could be traps laid out everywhere, but he decides to take the risk and try the northern forest. With this statement, our hero prepares himself and his harem. Now, he's going to show the princess who's the hunter and who's the hunted. Meanwhile, we see Princess Shaldana planning her next move with her soldiers, and it turns out that Ryu's suspicions were right all along. She takes a look at the map and figures that the only way out will be through the northern forest. Her assistant Sato asks her if setting traps would work, because they still don't know what the suspect looks like. However, the princess is sure that she'll be able to catch Ryu and even goes on to say that he will expose himself if her plan goes the way she wants it to. It turns out that she has a way to know if Ryu has come from another world, and that will be the trump card which is going to help her catch him. It's nighttime now, and our hero is simply chilling by the trees in the northern forest. Suddenly, he hears something suspicious, so he prepares to arm himself with his sword. It turns out to be Shaldana's assistant Sato, but Ryu doesn't identify him as anyone, so he maintains his guard. The assistant asks him to calm down and proceeds to take a seat, but Ryu tells him he didn't give him the permission to do so. The assistant begins with his questions and asks Ryu what he's doing in a place like this. After all, only adventurers would find themselves in the northern forest at this time in the night. Ryu says that he heard the border was closed off back at Eru, which is why he is now using this path. He is also shown to be heating some food, which smells good to Sato, but Ryu makes it clear that he's not sharing it with him. The assistant isn't happy with that decision, and he proceeds to warn Ryu against going through the forest all by himself. He says that there are a lot of wild wolves and dogs around the area, so he might land into some trouble. Ryu isn't one to make so much small talk, so he gets to the point and calls out Sato for also stepping into the forest alone. He goes on to ask who he is, and this is when Sato reveals that he is the assistant captain of the Succubus Knights. Sato is quite proud of his status, and Ryu decides to offer him some food after all. Now, the assistant reveals that he's actually chasing after a man in this forest, but he doesn't know what his face looks like. Ryu becomes a little cautious after hearing this, and it only gets worse when Sato tells him that he needs to follow him back to his camp. Ryu can easily fight Sato and take him down, but this won't lead to anything, so he agrees to come along. Now, Sato returns to his princess and tells her that he has captured the man who might have come from another world. He says that Ryu has the same smell as he does, and it makes Shaldana proud of her assistant captain. We can see that Ryu has been tied up in shackles, and he's made to look like a proper prisoner. Sato tells him that his princess is ready to see him now, but our hero states that the shackles are going a bit too extra. Anyway, he's fine with it because he knows he will be freed once he is found out to be innocent. Ryu even gives a shady smile, which suggests that he may have a trick or two up his sleeve. However, he becomes a little cautious when Princess Shaldana makes her way out of the tent. She says that Ryu's innocence will depend on him, and our hero prepares for an exciting time ahead. The princess shares a glance with Sato, and then she takes a good look at Ryu. Firstly, she thanks him for giving his time to her and allowing himself to be examined. Ryu is amazed to see the princess because she's quite cute, and then she says sorry for keeping him in shackles. Of course, Ryu has to act cool, so he says that it's fine, especially considering the fact that it might be suspicious to find someone in the forest at this time. However, the princess says that there's nothing suspicious at all about the act. This is because she now knows that the person from another world is indeed Ryu himself. Our hero is taken aback to hear this, and even tries to act dumb, but then Sheldon says it's useless to do this now. What gave him away was the fact that he did not respond to her like a person from this world, even after her being polite with him. Basically, since she is a princess, Ryu should have bowed down and treated her with respect, almost like a slave. He didn't do this, which confirmed that he was not from this world. Sato is pleased to see his princess's plan succeed, but Ryu is still unfazed by the whole thing. He even gives away his identity when asked by the princess, and his name rings a bell for Sato, because even he is Japanese. Our hero takes a look at the assistant captain and asks him if he was summoned here as well. Sato says yes, and we learn that he had come here around 10 years ago. The princess is not interested in the man having a chatting session in front of her, so she tells them both to keep quiet. As far as Ryu is concerned, she is going to transfer him back to the captain and they will think of a way to deal with him. Our hero simply says thank you, but the princess goes on to say that he could have been a very useful fighter for the kingdom. After all, even though he was weak at the time of his summoning, he was still able to take the lives of all those knights and even Geitsu himself. Ryu's physical strength would have been a true asset to someone like Sheldon, but our hero laughs at the idea and tells her to stop joking with him. This is a bit surprising, because the summoned people are usually supposed to listen to the ones who summon them. Sato is a bit confused by what's going on, because Ryu is not afraid at all. There are many more soldiers that are going to reach here soon, and they will be strong enough to handle him. Sato believes that Ryu does not understand what he's gotten himself into, but even then, he can't take such a big risk. He decides to speak up, so he interrupts Sheldon in the middle of her chat. Sato doesn't want to be rude, but he tells the princess that they should get rid of Ryu as soon as possible. This is a shocker for Sheldon, because the king had ordered for Ryu to be brought back alive. To betray His Majesty's direct order is a cardinal sin, and for Sato to even draw out his sword in front of Sheldon is an offense. However, the assistant captain tells his princess that he is willing to be punished later for his crimes. Now, Sato takes out his sword and is about to slash Ryu, but he allows him to say his last words because they are both from Japan. Our hero smiles back and says that he doesn't need to do that, which makes Sato wonder how brave he is. Of course, it was never going to end this way, and Ryu says that he's not the one who's going to go down today. With that announcement, a massive wind attack charges into the scene and is about to take down Sheldon, but Sato rushes to his princess and saves her life. He apologizes for getting a bit frisky with her, but she's fine with it. Sato has no idea what's going on, because this was a magic attack, and that's when he turns back to see Sarah with her master. She frees Ryu from his shackles and is glad to see him just fine. Our hero thanks her for pulling off such an amazing move without even hitting him, and Sato wonders if Sarah is his comrade. Of course, she makes it weird by calling herself Ryu's slave, and it makes things a bit awkward for everyone. Sato can't believe what he's seeing or even hearing, but Ryu is worried for Rora because he can't see her anywhere. Sarah says that her sister is busy dealing with the other soldiers, but then Rora shows up and says that she's done with her mission. She says that the soldiers were not at all expecting a magic attack, and Sato is helpless at this point. He would have never guessed that Ryu would have such cute slave girls working for him, and on top of that, they can use magic as well. After all, not many people in this world can use such powers, and if they're willing to work for the king, then they get the knight status instantly. It turns out that the abilities of each magic user may vary, but it is a safe assumption that one magic user is as good as an entire army of mortal soldiers. Princess Sheldon is defeated, but she wants to know who the girls are. Sarah and Rora don't care about her question and simply say that the enemies of their master are also their own enemies. Sarah and Rora would do anything for Ryu, and Sheldon is amazed by their powers. Both she and Sato want to know why such cute girls have become the slaves of a man like Ryu. However, our hero simply tells them that they have time to retreat since there's no way for them to fight now. Despite this, the girls suggest getting rid of these two because they will become famous for it. After all, taking the lives of royal people helps you get instant fame in this kingdom. Sato panics and wonders if he can use his skills to fight the trio. However, he knows that he won't be able to win this encounter, so he thinks of a way to save his princess. In a surprise twist, Ryu says that he doesn't want to fight either of Sheldon or Sato. He knows that he and the girls would easily win the battle. But even if they make one wrong move, it could lead to casualties, and that's not what our hero wants. He is also aware that the girls are willing to give away their lives for him, but says that Sato is the same and is ready to do anything for his princess. Keeping that in mind, Ryu decides to leave Sheldon and the assistant captain alive. Sarah and Rora are amazed that their master is giving them the same value as that of nobles. and it makes them blush. Seeing Ryu's behavior, Princess Shaldana also tells Sato to put his sword away, and our hero thanks her for using her brain. He is about to leave with his slave girls, but Sato asks him to wait. He wants to know if Ryu is from some kind of mafia gang in Japan, but this amuses our hero. He says that he's just in high school, but Sato thinks he's messing around. He demands an honest answer, but Ryu maintains that he's just 16 years old. The assistant captain feels insulted that he lost to a mere student, but also asks Ryu why he would take the lives of so many people without any regret at all, even more so when he has been summoned from a peaceful era in Japan. Princess Shaldana is taken aback by her assistant's passion, but Ryu has an answer ready for him. He simply tells Sato that he did not lose the right to protect himself from the people who were trying to end him. He goes on to mock Sato by asking if he should have just stood still and let the soldiers attack him. Ryu even explains that he will hit back if someone tries to hit him first. It has always been his rule, and he will never strike anyone first unless he has been provoked to do it. Ryu channels his sensei's energy and says that he is only ready to fight when he wants to take a life. However, his words are creeping out the girls, so he figures this is not the time to start talking about his life's philosophy. With this, he leaves with his slave girls and Sato is speechless, but the princess has a few words to say. She mentions that the continent will soon be united by her empire, and then Ryu will have nowhere to hide. However, our hero simply says that he will go back to his world by the time something like this happens. It's an open insult to the princess, and then Ryu heads out of the forest with his slave girls. After some time passes by, they come across a massive desert which is next to a trading zone. The trio needs to make their way to the oasis because that's where they can stock up on goods. Ryu is ready to do this, but then the girls ask him to watch out because a giant sandworm shows itself to them. The monster is quite large and things look a bit tricky for our hero, but then the sandworm turns its back on him. Ryu thinks of this as an open challenge and decides to show the beast what he's made of. He asks the girls to stand back and starts thinking of a plan of action. He first believes that the sandworm is mocking him so that he makes a move out of anger. It's not a bad assumption, because it will allow the beast to counterattack him and win. On top of that, since they are all in a desert, the advantage lies with the sandworm. Ryu needs to catch it off guard, so he tells Sarah and Rora to get to work. The girls are a bit concerned, because a sandworm's vision isn't one to be taken lightly. Despite this, Ryu is sure of his moves because he is not only focusing on the beast's vision. He has 2 cute girls with him, and the numbers are in his favor, so the risk is most definitely one worth taking. The trio attacks the sandworm and they manage to defeat it after a brief battle. The girls ask their master to deal the final blow, but he isn't interested in doing this because it's not his style. However, the slave girls mention that he can absorb the beast's energy if he lands the final blow, since humans have that special skill in this world. This strategy actually reminds Ryu of a video game he used to play back at home. He is fine with finishing the sandworm off with his sword, but he can't remember what this move used to be called in the video game. This is too much for him to take, and he just wants to go back to Tokyo now. Our hero reaches the trading zone and comes across a high-level magician named Anna Maria. He asks her to show him a way back to Earth, but his hopes are crushed when he learns that there is no such method in this world. Ryu can't believe what he's hearing, especially after he spent 2 whole months crossing through the desert to come here. His efforts can't go to waste, so he asks Anna Maria to help him because he had heard that she would be able to find a way. Anna Maria doesn't know what to say to Ryu, so she explains that there are 3 types of magic in this world. The first one is martial arts magic, then there's word magic, and finally there's confer magic. Of course, Ryu would have already known this, so she goes on to give an explanation on these 3 magic types. For martial arts magic, there is no chanting involved as it only affects the user. For word magic, the user will need to use some kind of pre-chant and then offer their prana energy to a god, a spirit, or a demon. This will enable them to apply supernatural acts. Finally, there's confer magic, where a seal is put on a weapon and then the user's prana is sent to it. Now, in these 3 forms of magic, the only version that can be used for summoning people is word magic. In order to summon a person, the user must give away their prana energy to the god of their world. Anna Maria goes on to explain that it's easy for the people of her world to summon people from Ryu's world, because they know the god whom they need to send their prana energy to. However, if someone has to be sent back to Earth, then it becomes tough because they don't know the god of their world. Basically, the summoner will need the permission of the god who is ruling the world where the person is being sent to. This is way too much for Ryu to take in, so he puts his mind to work once again. He asks Anna Maria if knowing the name of the god is enough to get the job done, and she says yes. This makes him breathe a sigh of relief, because he already knows the names of some of the gods of Earth. He can also go around asking the humans who have been brought to this world for the names of their gods. Sarah and Rora also say that they can find some sort of text that has such names written on them. All of this sounds well and good, but Anna Maria has some bad news for our hero. She brings out a book that is locked with chains and reveals that it contains the writing of all the other humans who had come to her before Ryu. It turns out that they had also wanted to go back to Earth, but none of the gods' names that they said were of any use. Ryu is already saddened to hear this, but Anna Maria makes it worse by revealing this book has gone through hundreds of years of editing. People might have assumed that Anna Maria was capable enough of sending Ryu back to Earth, but the rumors had come from her possession of this book, since it's basically useless. The only thing that Ryu can do is give a defeated expression. He is unable to come to terms with the fact that hundreds of years could not come up with even one correct name. Anna Maria now says this is exactly why she said she couldn't help him with his request. She even uses some sarcasm by calling Ryu lucky due to his competence. This obviously makes him angry, and it leads the girls to worry for their master. After all, they never saw him lose his cool even once, whether it was when he saved them from the Red Moon bandits, or even when he was captured by Princess Sheldon. Rora tells Sarah that Ryu is actually a very gentle person, but she is confused because her master is quite angry at this point. Rora admits that Ryu is not in the best frame of mind right now, but that's only because he can't go back to his world. On top of that, to know that the people of Earth are only brought here to become slaves would definitely anger anyone. Rora asks Sarah how she would feel if she were to become someone's slave against her will. Of course, her answer is a bit extreme because she is ready to end anyone who would do such a thing, but it gives an idea of what Ryu is going through. Being battle slaves isn't a bad thing for the girls because they have been blessed with magic. However, there are humans who aren't able to do such things but are still forced to be slaves. Rora explains that Ryu is not just thinking about his own position, but also about all the humans who were forced into doing unspeakable things as slaves. At the same time, this is something to worry about, because Ryu's anger can be redirected to this world. If his emotions get out of hand, then he might just lose his mind and burn everything to the ground. Sarah begins to worry, and rightly so, because not only is Ryu not responding to his slave girls, he has also locked himself in his room for 2 days and hasn't eaten a single bite. Now, we see our hero in his room, being troubled by his current situation. Suddenly, he finds himself in some kind of void and wants to know where he is. A strange voice calls out to him and asks him to get angry. Ryu calls out to the voice and orders it to show itself. However, the voice simply says that it's the existence that understands him best. Ryu has no idea what's going on, but the voice asks him what he desires the most. Our hero says that he simply wants to go back to Asuka and his sensei, so the voice tells him that the possibility of that isn't zero. The voice shows itself as some kind of overpowered entity and tells Ryu that his wishes can only come true if he puts in the right sacrifice. He asks Ryu if he knows what he needs to do and simply says that he needs to get angry. Our hero is asked who caused all of this to happen in the first place, and he says that it was Gaetsu. The entity turns out to be some kind of demonic soul, and it tells Ryu that the world itself is distorted, not just Gaetsu. The problem lies in the people who had made this world in the first place, because they are all using people from Earth to carry out their twisted fantasy. He urges Ryu to take back what's his, but this means that he will need to take lives and do unspeakable things to the people of this kingdom. The demon tells Ryu that he has the power to destroy this entire world all by himself, and he should just allow him to take over his body. Things are about to get really interesting as Ryu looks like he's going to turn to the dark side. But then the girls break into his room just in time. They stop the demon from tricking Ryu any further, and our hero snaps back to reality. He is a bit confused to see his slave girls in front of him, but they explain that he was screaming for a while. They had no choice but to break into the room, and it looks like they made the right choice. The girls are so happy to see their master that they bury his face in their curvy bodies. Of course, Ryu has to tell them that he can't breathe, so the girls let him take his face away from heaven for a bit. Now, Rora asks her master to eat some food because he hasn't had anything since he locked himself in his room. Ryu finally realizes that he's snapped out of that terrible vision, and he looks around to see that his door has been smashed. The girls apologize for this because they had no other option but to break it down. After all, if their master is heard screaming, then they will do whatever it takes to keep him safe. This is fine for Ryu, but he tells the girls that they can also ask the owner of the inn for a master key. Rora and Sarah act cute and innocent because they didn't think of this before, but all's well that ends well. Now, Ryu goes to the owner of the inn and asks for some food. She is shocked to see that he has just woken up, but decides to give him food right away. Ryu is shocked to see the amount of stew that she's giving him, because it's a lot for him, even though he eats a lot. The owner says that the food is not just for him but also the 2 slave girls. It turns out that both Rora and Sarah also chose not to eat for 2 days, just like their master. Our hero can't believe that the girls have also been hungry for as long as him, and the owner tells him rush back to them as soon as possible. Ryu thanks her for the food, but she tells him that it's just how she likes to run her business. The owner also says that she's going to charge him for the broken door, so she doesn't need any thanks for the food. Ryu quickly rushes back to the room and tells his girls that it's time to eat together. However, he walks in on them changing their clothes, so it leads to an awkward scene. Anyway, it's time to sit down for their meal and Ryu is not able to say anything, especially after seeing what he was not supposed to see. The girls simply ask him to calm his anger, because it's affecting his health. He says sorry for making them worry, but the girls don't have an issue with that. They say that it's fine for Ryu to be angry with this world, because they will always remain his allies. The girls might have cute intentions in mind, but Ryu simply calls them fools for being so blind. They worry that they have made him even more upset, but it also looks like our hero is enduring some pain. He tries to bow down and thank the girls for always having his side, but they feel that he's not at all letting his feelings out. It's okay for him to express how he truly feels, but since he likes to act like an adult all the time, both Rira and Sarah find it cute. Of course, Ryu doesn't like this, so he tells them not to laugh at him. It looks like the worst is over now for our hero as he gets back to fighting monsters and collecting rewards. He ends a giant monster and figures that he will need to collect its bodily fluids. All of this is well and good, but the girls ask him why he's still carrying on with adventures and missions. After all, he does have all of Azusa's money with him, so he can afford to chill and relax for now. Ryu doesn't seem to remember who Azusa is, so the girls remind him that he was the fat man who used to be their earlier master. The answer is actually quite simple for Ryu, because he doesn't have any family or home to go back to. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even have a friend, and the only person he can rely on is himself. So, for him to continue as an adventurer will keep him distracted and also help him find his purpose. Rora wonders if it's some kind of philosophical thing for humans, but Ryu explains that it's more like a warrior who wants to train himself. Luckily for our hero, he has learned a lot of useful tricks from his sensei and they are helping him survive in this world. Of course, it's his power that can help him rough it out, but Rora tells him that he still has her and Sarah to give him company. It's not like he's actually alone in this world, so he says sorry to the girls, even though it was not what they were expecting from him. The journey continues through thick and thin, and our trio manages to find themselves in a new port town. However, as they explore the place, they run into a guild master named Vols, who had sent out a personal invite to Ryu. Once they reach the guild, he gives them a compulsory quest, which takes them by surprise. The truth of the matter, though, is that Vols has found himself in quite a pinch and he wants Ryu to take on this mission at any cost. Of course, our hero had suspected something because it was a bit odd to receive such a request in the first place. Now, Ryu asks Vols why he's giving him a compulsory quest, because this is something that can only be given to high-rank adventurers. Vols does admit that it's not the norm, but he has no other choice simply because there aren't as many skilled people over here. The quest might be sudden, but the client is an important one for Vols, so he needs it done urgently. The mission is to escort a group of merchants to another kingdom, but Rora asks what would happen if they were to refuse. Vols says that refusal could lead to suspension of Ryu's guild license and even threatens to revoke it, but promises a handsome reward. He will also be sending some mercenaries with the team and offers the best possible equipment for the travel. It sounds good enough to Ryu, but then he sees the carriage that they'll be using and is very disappointed by it. Now, we see a girl named Leonie, who is actually a mercenary hired for this mission. She reveals that the merchants she needs to protect don't have any cargo with them, so the mission definitely feels like it's a bit suspicious. The only reason she's here is because of the pay, but she worries that the mission might already be a failure. Leonie sees Ryu and greets him, after which she also introduces her trusted assistant Balls, who only seems to have one arm. Now, the merchants come to the scene, but are shocked to see that their protection team only has girls and a man with one arm. Ryu doesn't like the way the merchant leader is talking, so Rora explains that he's called Masara, who is the client Vols was talking about. Masara is also a fat man, and he shows his shady side when he sees Rora and Sarah. He identifies them as female battle slaves, which is quite the sight for a man like him. He offers to find the girls a new master, because he feels that they are better off in the bedroom than the battlefield. This is enough for Ryu to show his playful side, so he decides to show Masara a secret technique to prove his skills. Our hero proceeds to massage Masara for a bit, and the fat man says that shoulder massages are quite nice for him. He complains that being a merchant can be a tiring job, but Ryu tells him that he's made a big mistake. He says that Masara should not let a martial artist get behind him so easily, but the fat man doesn't follow what he's saying. To prove his point, Ryu simply says that a truly dangerous man will not seem dangerous at all when you meet him. Masara doesn't get what he's trying to say, so he simply calls Ryu a good boy with a smart upbringing. Our hero thanks him for the kind words, but also reveals that Masara is very easy to read. He slowly goes on to wrap his hands around the fat man's neck and asks him if he's trying to lie to him. Of course, it makes Masara scared, but Ryu leaves him alone for now. Later at night, he tells the team that Masara is lying to them about the mission. In all probability, this is a trap being set by the merchant, so Leone gains an interest. Ryu could feel the pulse change in Masara while he was massaging him, and Leone asks if this was why he almost choked him. Our hero says that the choking part was only because he didn't like the way he spoke to his slave girls. Leone says that the real problem now is to understand what the target is, and what kind of trap is going to be set for them. Balls asks his mistress if she can cancel the quest, but she says that won't be possible. Canceling a quest just because it seems shady is not a good enough reason, so the team will have to go ahead with the plan whether they like it or not. After all, if something goes wrong, then the guild will simply suspend or revoke their license. This gets Ryu thinking about the guild and how it works to help adventurers like him. He reasons that there could be someone from behind who is pulling the strings. For all they know, Masara could be a spy, because there is still no reason to explain why he was lying in the first place. Ryu realizes that the target could be him, since the carriage was made to be appealing. Leone asks if she should call more people from her Crimson Lion gang to help with the mission. However, Ryu says no because this is most likely his own problem, so he needs to find a way to deal with it. The most important thing is that he does not want to risk the lives of any more people. Leone is shocked to hear this, but then she breaks into a laugh because she feels that Ryu is either a very nice guy or a complete fool. Leone even says that she and Balls could be secret assassins who have been sent to take his life, but our hero simply says that he'll gladly take that risk for now. This leads Leone to applaud his guts. But now, Ryu needs to figure a way to control the carriage. He can't do it by himself, so he asks Sarah to take care of this task. She acts cute and says that she will always listen to his orders, so he doesn't need to ask her to do things for him. This leads to an awkward moment for our hero, because Sarah's words could mean a lot of things at the same time. Of course, this is not the time to let his intrusive thoughts win, so he asks Balls if he can use magic. The girls also want in on this plan since they can use magic as well, but Ryu seems to have something else on his mind. Later in the night, Leone goes to Ryu and tells him that he might not be the prime target. After all, she is the leader of a popular mercenary group, so maybe the merchants want her and not Ryu. Our hero is fine with that, but he refers to Leone in a respectful manner. She doesn't want him to be so polite, because she wants to make our hero her lover boy. Leone proceeds to lean in for a kiss, and it looks like Ryu is finally going to get some heaven on earth. However, before things can become steamy, both Rora and Sarah stop Leone from her lewd actions because they don't want any other girl to touch their master. Leone tries to reason that she was only going for a kiss, but the girls say that they cannot allow any surprise attacks. Leone isn't fazed by this and simply suggests doing something which is not a surprise. Leone simply comes up with a better plan to have her way. She asks Ryu to come with her into the carriage that has been prepared for their journey ahead. Leone even has some booze ready for her to enjoy with our hero, and she wants to have a good, long chat with him. Naturally, both Rora and Sarah tell her that she can't do this, even if their master is fine with letting his intrusive thoughts win. With no other excuse left to give, the girls say that Leone can't trick a teenager like Ryu into doing unspeakable things to her with the promise of booze. Of course, our hero wants to have some fun, so he tells his slave girls that he's fine to hold a strategy meeting. On top of that, he has no issues with drinking either, but Rora and Sarah don't want to share him with any other girl, so they tell him to keep quiet. Anyway, nothing ends up happening, and Ryu is left to imagine what could have happened if he just let his intrusive thoughts win. The night passes by, and it's time to set out for the mission to protect the merchants. All seems to be going well for now as Sarah takes the lead in riding the carriage. However, just as Ryu had expected, the team is walking right into a trap as they are being watched by an evil group. They comment that things are going as per the plan, and the team is using the exact same route that was given to them. However, since there are quite a few people, they need to be careful. First thing is to order the bowmen to shoot and capture all the team members when they split up. We see a shady man in the middle of the bushes telling his men that there is no need to take the heads of these people, but they just have to capture a witch who cannot be allowed to cross the border. With that, an intense sequence kicks off wherein the enemy forces fire their arrows at our hero and his squad. Sarah calls out to her master to let him know the show has begun, so he turns on fight mode. Ryu orders Sarah to avoid the arrows and charge right through the enemy. She does as he says and rushes the carriage through the onslaught. At the same time, the other members notice that a cavalry is chasing after them. Things aren't looking good, but Ryu seems to feel that he is indeed the target of this whole trap. After all, the arrows are only being aimed at the carriage where he is sitting. Our hero is led to believe that this is a gift from Princess Shaldana for letting her and Sato live. But he must stick to the job and let the merchants pass through. Things get rough, so Ryu tells Sarah to keep the carriage steady. He then proceeds to eject the carriage in the most impressive manner. Now that he's created a chance for Sarah, he tells her to make the most of it and create some distance. She does as he says and goes full force with her master sitting behind her. However, Rora spots something even more shady as the merchants are standing right in front of them and pointing their swords at the team. As a matter of fact, they are being led by the same fat man Masara, whom Ryu had choked earlier. He orders everyone to charge at our hero, so Ryu braces for impact. He and the girls are surrounded by the enemy forces on both sides, and it looks like Ryu will have to unleash his full strength once again. He did expect this to happen, but then in a sudden turn of events, the merchants cross Ryu and the girls. He is surprised that they are not attacking him and turns back to see that they are going for the cavalry from behind. This leads Ryu to wonder if these people are actually fighting amongst themselves. None of this seems to make any sense to Ryu or the slave girls, but it does look like an intense battle is about to begin. Before we can take things forward, we are taken to a flashback from the previous night. Since Ryu was able to predict the trap set for his team, he wanted to take the advantage. Lione is a bit confused to hear this, because simply knowing that they're walking into a trap doesn't mean that they will walk out of it unharmed. Ryu decides to speak in simple language and tells Lione that the advantage is simply knowing this fact, so that they won't be caught off guard. The counter is that the side attacking first will be the one to gain the advantage, which Ryu agrees with. However, he intends to choose the exact place and time of their planned assault. Ryu reasons that even if they are the planned targets, they are not criminals because they are still doing a job, which is to escort the merchants. So, the enemy will take care not to attack them in a public place, otherwise they will be held guilty in court for committing a crime. It's the same way he can't confront Masara because he's posing as a merchant. Due to this, it's highly unlikely that Masara will bring in a big army to attack our hero. After all, it's best to do shady things in the dark. Keeping that in mind, the best plan of attack for the merchants would be to surprise Ryu and the others within an area that works to their advantage. Lione's assistant Balls wonders if the merchants will be able to make use of such a surprise because they might just hide in a random corner. However, Ryu is confident that they'll be visible since they're a small organization. His reasoning behind this is that there are more than just 1 or 2 people in this gang, so if they were to make a plan, then everyone would have to be fine with it. After all, a whole group of goons would never just blindly follow one man based on his mood. This is some smart thinking by our hero. And he goes on to flex his strategy some more by assessing the path they are going to be taking. Basically, it's just a mountain area, so it would be perfect for an ambush. Of course, Lione has some doubts of her own, so she asks what would happen if the goons chose to attack them at night. Ryu doesn't really think that would be possible because it gets very hard to see at night. As a matter of fact, the enemy might just end up taking the lives of one of their own people, so it's best for them to attack in broad daylight. Our hero also takes this chance to mock Sato because he had earlier mentioned his name to Ryu right before attacking him. He simply believes that no one would be silly enough to make such a foolish mistake. Funnily enough, Sato ends up catching a cold due to Ryu mentioning his name. So, Ryu decides to sum up the whole thing and he mentions how the enemy might not have any mages with them. It would be rather tough if there were people with magic on the other side, because they would be hard to deal with. Luckily, that doesn't happen to be the case, which was why Ryu could safely assume that they would only use arrows and other such weapons to attack the carriage. It's time to go back to the battle zone, but before we can do that, we first go through Ryu's planning, because he knows he'll have to attack the merchants after the ambush begins. It would be best to take care of the merchants head-on because the team is strong enough to take them down. However, there's also the fear of reinforcements coming in, so this is a big risk to take. Lione worries that they might get caught in a pincer movement if they're not too careful about their situation. Ryu doesn't feel the same way and actually says that it would be a good thing if they found themselves in such a situation. Lione is confused, so Ryu explains that a pincer movement only works when it's used against someone as strong as you. However, in this case, Ryu and his team are much stronger than the merchants, so even if they were to get caught by that tactic, they can just fight their way out of it and then run away to safety. After all, the evil merchants aren't the only ones with a trick up their sleeves. However, as we finally come back to the present scene, it turns out that Ryu's planning has gone to waste. The merchants aren't interested in him, so it doesn't look like they're the enemies here. This is a bit too much for Ryu to take in, because he can't come up with any reason for this. Lione tries to bring him back to his senses and asks if he's fine to carry on. She also says that her Crimson Lion soldiers are fine, but some of the other mercenaries have been ended by the enemy. Lione asks what to do now, because as per the plan, they should be leading the goons to their demise. Ryu takes a moment to collect himself, and then he says that they should just continue the plan the way it was made. He asks Lione to gather all her men as soon as she can, and then our hero gets into the action. He charges away while leading some of the mercenaries behind him. The soldiers and Masara's merchants are about to tear each other a new one, but then they watch Ryu and his horse jump in front of them. This takes the men by surprise, because they had thought our hero was inside the fallen carriage. The whole thing just feels a bit too confusing, because the men believe that they have been tricked by a witch, and not Ryu. This witch seems to be the main target of the operation, and even Masara isn't on the plan, which means that there was never any conflict between the merchants and the soldiers. Upon hearing this, Ryu wonders what's going on because it's the first time he's hearing of a witch. Anyway, he doesn't have time to think about such things, so he runs away from the scene with his team. Leone is glad to see how he managed to trick the merchants and the soldiers, but Ryu still has a lot of questions that he needs answers to. At least his plan came through, and no one from his team is badly wounded. Lionel says that what happens next will be all on Rora's shoulders, because she has a lot counting on her, as does Ryu. Now, we are taken to yet another flashback where we see Rora, who is sitting under a tree. She is calm and cute as always, but then she hears someone behind her and gets alarmed. Luckily, it's just her master who is calling out her name. Rora says sorry for being lazy, and she says that she will get ready for the next day as soon as possible. However, this is not why Ryu has come to talk to her. He has something important to say, but his slave girl seems to fear the worst whenever he talks to her in private. Rora feels that she is going to be chased away by her master because she didn't let him do lewd things to Leone. She even goes on to say that Ryu only likes girls that are softer and cuter than her. Since she's a battle slave, she feels that her master doesn't like her powers. Of course, this is not at all what Ryu wanted to say, and he tries to calm Rora down by saying he needs her something that only she can do. Ryu mentions that he needs her to finish off the plan that he had started. Basically, Rora will need to lure the enemies away from their attack zone, and then lead them to a magic circle where they will get trapped, thus turning the tables on them. Once this is done, Ryu will give her a signal, and then she will use her magic to wipe out the soldiers. Since her master is trusting her with such a task, Rora feels good about herself and lights up like a doll. She says that she will happily do this for Ryu, and is even ready to wipe out thousands of soldiers with her magic if he wants her to. Of course, our hero tells her to calm down because he has no such idea. He reminds Rora that the enemies will be riding on horses, so that makes the whole thing a bit more difficult for his slave girl. She does have wind magic, but it's not stable enough to attack such a fast-moving object. This is exactly why Ryu has called for backup to assist Rora. He tells Rora that Balls will be helping her because he's quite strong. However, the slave girl says that it would be better if she was the one assisting Balls, because he is much stronger and faster than she is. This takes Ryu by surprise, so he asks Rora if she is really his battle slave. She doesn't get what he means by this, so he says that he only trusts her and no one else. So, even if Balls is better than her, he would still want Rora to do the job. It's obviously easier to have your slave complete your tasks, so Ryu pumps up Rora by telling her that only she has the power to make his plan a success. It's a rather dramatic scene, but then we come back to the present where Masara is screaming like a madman. He seems to be very keen on getting rid of the witch that was mentioned earlier, and the merchants make their way to our hero. The problem here is that Ryu doesn't want anything to happen to the merchants because they're the ones paying him in the first place. The rogue soldiers are still fine, because Rora's magic will be more than enough to take care of them. This puts our hero into a serious frame of thought, because he needs to make sense of what's going on. The merchants were the ones who raised the request and are paying him for transport, so they are neither his foes or his allies. Even the goons going after the witch are not exactly after Ryu, so they can't be called the enemy either. The only people who need to be punished are the ones who are directly trying to attack Ryu. Since using the carriage as bait was good enough to lure them here, Ryu comes up with a quick idea. He asks Sarah if she likes the fat man Masara, but she gives off an angry face because of Masara's shady intentions. Then, he asks Leone what she thinks of the fat man, and she too seems to hate him because he only looked at her with lewd thoughts. Masara was also ordering the goons not to let anyone survive the attack as long as it meant that the witch was taken down. This is all it takes for Ryu to make things interesting with his genius move. He charges at the goons and then calls out to Rora in grand fashion. With that, his slave girl emerges from the shadows and chants an epic spell to summon giant bamboo shards. Balls offers her some assistance, and the attack that follows is truly devastating. It looks like all of the attackers have been taken care of by this move, but Ryu isn't going to get carried away so easily. Leone also suspects some movement from within the shards, so she asks the others to check for any survivors. Ryu is able to find Masara's head popping out like a little toy, and he asks him if he feels alive right now. The fat man is not pleased by the way things have gone, but then Balls tells Ryu that the number of survivors has been ensured. Ryu is pleased by his quick work and goes on to applaud Balls for being able to merge his magic with his slave girl. Even Balls speaks highly of Rora because this was his first time doing magic with a slave girl. While the men have a nice chat, Masara tries to get their attention because he's feeling a bit left out. He mocks Ryu and tells him that he has just gone back on his word. After all, he did just trap the person who paid him for a job. However, Masara's words don't seem to have any effect on Ryu or even Balls for that matter. Our hero has an answer to the fat man. as he says that they were not worthy of being his bosses, especially after they raised their own swords on him. Ryu declares that he and his team have done nothing wrong, and it confuses Masara. It's at this very moment when Ryu confronts the fat man about not being a merchant in the first place. This shocks him to his core, and it only gets worse when our hero pulls out his sword. Masara doesn't like the look of this, so he tries to understand why Ryu is behaving this way. He simply says that he's going to silence the fat man, so in a desperate plea, Masara asks Ryu to get rid of the real villains, who are revealed to be knights from Rhodes, Syria. After all, they're the ones who raised their swords first. The fat man goes on to explain that these knights like to act as heroes, but they're actually shameless assassins, who go around taking lives in cold blood. This piques Ryu's interest, so he asks Masara who he really is. The fat man simply says that he's a slave merchant who is trying to make a life for himself by selling innocent girls. He used to be a thief, but he's changed his ways. And then he even tries to convince Ryu to let him go. However, Masara is so cheap that he says he'll sell slave girls to Ryu for cheap prices, instead of giving them for free. Ryu knows a bad deal when he sees one, so he mocks Masara for being a shady weirdo. Of course, the fat man gets angry because he didn't even know how skilled Ryu actually Balls decides to stop the chat, and he tells Ryu that Masara might have important information that they can use. However, it won't be easy to get it out of him, so Ryu suggests using torture methods. Of course, Sarah and Rora are both ready to use extreme measures, since they hate fat merchants in general. Masara figures he's in a tight spot, and not just literally, so he admits to tricking our hero and begs him to have mercy. However, by doing this, he has essentially exposed himself and proved Ryu's theory right. Our hero points this out to him and says that Masara can't really complain about anything now because he's admitted his crime. The fat man loses his cool over being defeated, but then one of the knights decides to comment on the situation. He is totally clueless about what's going on because he had no idea that it would turn out this way. Basically, the knights were sent here to hunt down a witch, and since she's a big target, they were willing to take the risk. Ryu decides to turn on his alpha mode and he walks up to the knight with intent. This knight turns out to be the leading soldier, whose name is Mihail. Ryu sure seems to recognize him, and even calls out his name in front of everyone. It's at this moment when he points to Rora and tells Mihail that he is looking at the next ruler of Rhodes, Syria. Mihail is shocked and speechless as he gazes upon Rora's curvy body, but not with any intrusive thoughts. Our hero once again states that Rora is the next ruler of the Rhodes Syria kingdom, and the tension rises between Mihail and the slave girl. He asks her for her name, but she only says Rora. Mihail asks for her family name, but Ryu doesn't understand why that is needed. The knight leader says that you can only become king if you have a known origin, which is a bit of an issue for our hero. He knows that he can't let Rora use her Malfist name because that would lead to a lot of trouble in this world. Ryu acts quick and decides to give Rora his own family name, which is Miko Shiba. He then goes on to claim that he is her younger brother, and it shocks both Mihail as well as Rora. The reason for Mihail's surprise is that Ryu looks old enough to be her father, let alone her younger brother. Our hero is sick and tired of the jokes, so he just wants to move on from here. Even Mihail doesn't look too thrilled about his defeat, so he tells Ryu to get done with him as soon as possible. However, Ryu is not going to take his life just yet, maybe because he could use Mihail for a genius plan later on. The knight leader states that Ryu will definitely want to end him at some point, but Leone takes over the chat and calls him out for wanting to do the exact same thing not too long ago. Ryu even tells Mihail that he is not his enemy, despite the carnage that he has caused today. Mihail is a bit confused and asks Ryu if he was sent by the nobles. This is exactly why Ryu wants to have a chat with Mihail rather than taking his life. He tells the knight leader to answer his questions first, and if he does a good job, then our hero will answer his questions too. To kick things off, Ryu places his hands on Mihail's neck and starts to choke him. As expected, the knight leader asks why he's doing such a thing, but Ryu just says it's a good luck charm. He even has a sense of humor as he asks Mihail not to panic while he does this to him. Ryu has his fun, and then he hands over the questioning to Sarah. The slave girl is very eager to talk to Mihail, but he's just amazed to realize that both Sarah and Rora are twins. It looks like his own intrusive thoughts are coming to the fore, but then Sarah asks if he's actually from the Imperial Guards of Rhodes, Syria. Her second question is if the whole purpose of this attack was to protect the throne of the kingdom. Question number 3 is if Mihail and his men planned their attack to protect the princess. And by this point, the knight leader is already sweating out of anxiety. The fourth question is whether the knights are fighting the nobles under the orders of the queen. And this leads to question number 5, which asks if the first princess will be the one to take the throne, especially after the king's untimely demise. Sarah isn't done just yet, because her 6th question asks if the king's testament was used as a shield to protect the second princess from the first princess. From the looks of Mihail's face, it seems as if he is at a loss for words, and Ryu can relate to him. After all, Sarah's questions are not easy to answer, so it would be unfair to put all the blame on Mihail. However, Sarah saves the best for last and asks Mihail if the person he was sent to end was her sister Rora. The look on the Knight Leader's face says it all, and we finally learn that the witch in question all this time was none other than Rora herself, probably due to her magic powers. It all makes sense to Ryu as well, but this is not the problem right now. It's what follows after this, which is going to make things tough for our hero and his team. The guild had clearly used Ryu and the others as bait in order to end the magical Rora, and since the nobles have a hand in, our hero has been betrayed by the very people who depended on him. Balls tries to come up with a solution and he asks if they should go to the other town's guild and report the matter. Leone doesn't think that's a good idea, because they don't have any evidence to prove their claims. As a matter of fact, their complaint could be seen as an act of rebellion and get them all sued by the guild. The name that comes to mind right now is Vols, who is the same noble that gave this job to Ryu without even asking for his permission. The team needs to find a way to prove how Vols was involved in all of this, but even then, Ryu knows that they won't have it easy if they go against the guild. On top of that, Vols is a very rich man, which means that he can use his wealth to bribe officials whenever he wants. Leone starts thinking, and she mentions the city of Fulzard, which is the largest trade hub in the kingdom. The team could try to use the officials from here to go up against the guild master. In the middle of all this, Ryu decides to ask Balls how he was able to make Messara so talkative all of a sudden. He just bends and picks up a twig, implying that he had used this to make Messara speak the truth. Neither Ryu nor Leone can figure how a twig proved to be so effective. But then Balls reveals that he had simply stuck the twig where the sun doesn't shine in the fat man's body. This is a rather extreme measure that even Ryu finds to be a bit too rough. However, Balls smiles and says that people as shady as Messara need to be given this kind of treatment. Ryu takes note of this, but his slave girls are shocked to hear such a cruel method. In the middle of their chat, Mihail loses his cool and keeps saying that he can't accept what just happened. Basically, he doesn't buy the fact that Rora is the true first princess, and he calls her a fake who has been sent by the noble. He maintains that the only true heir to the throne is Princess Lupis. And then we get to see the cute princess in all her curvy glory. Lupis looks out the window and thinks about Mihail. But then Ryu ruins this intense moment by accepting what the Knight Leader has just said. Mihail is confused to hear this. Ryu goes on to toy with Mihail's brain some more by saying Rora is not the illegitimate daughter of the king. Neither is she a princess. She does have an origin though, because she's twins with Sarah. Mihail is as clueless as he can be, and that's when Ryu finally reveals that he was deceiving him all this time. Ryu is clearly having fun with this, and he goes on to mumble some more words, but Mihail loses his patience. Our hero tells him to calm down, because even he is trying to make sense of what Messara told him, and what the Rhodes Syria Knights have said. In order to understand what's going on, we are taken back to the time the king had passed away. Princess Lupis was preparing to take over from her father, but then she got some news about a girl who was of the same bloodline as the king. Of course, having an illegitimate child is nothing new for a king, because he would obviously act on his intrusive thoughts without having to worry about the consequences. Also, preserving the royal bloodline came before everything else, which meant that if an illegitimate child was to be found, then even they would be considered for the throne. So, when Princess Lupis was about to get crowned as the new queen, she received a word from a nobleman named Marquis, who also happened to be the leader of the noble faction. He said that the king left behind a will which mentioned his illegitimate girl who was living in the town of Myas. As expected, the knights serving Princess Lupis were a bit suspicious of this behavior, because they wanted their curvy princess to become a curvy queen. It was due to this will that the knights set out to find this illegitimate child and expose her for being a scam, which explains why Mihail had assumed that Rora was sent by the nobles. Anyway, this news had led to a lot of friction between the knights and the nobles. While the knights were skilled and strong, they did not have the knowledge of internal affairs, and the nobles took advantage of this to have their way in the kingdom. The knight faction was getting weaker due to this, and then one fine day, news came out that some people from Myast were coming to Rhodes Syria, and that too, through Marquia's territory. Of course, this led the knights to believe that it was army gathered by the nobles and the illegitimate child of the king, which explains why Mihail and his men came to attack our hero. Now that the knight leader has explained everything to Ryu, he asks him what the illegitimate daughter of the king looked like. Mihail says that the rumors described the girl as a teenager with silver hair. Our hero is still unable to believe such a thing, so he asks Mihail if he was really ready to take the life of an innocent girl just for the throne. The knight leader says yes, and it is believed that the illegitimate child is the one who was believed to be the witch all along. Ryu is ashamed to hear such a thing, and he tells Mihail that his plan was very reckless. The problem is that even if the plan had become a success, it would not have solved the root of the problem between the knights and the nobles. Ryu also tells Mihail that by his calculations, the illegitimate child should have already reached Rhodes Syria by now, although he can't give any proof of the same. This is devastating news for Mihail. And then Leone decides to rub some salt into his wounds by saying the nobles have spread false information. The whole plan was to make them chase after Ryu in the first place, because he was nothing more than bait. Mihail has the look of defeat on his face, but Ryu decides to explain the whole thing to him. Basically, the nobles had bribed the guildmaster Vals into finding a teenage girl with silver hair, who in this case happened to be Rora. On top of that, they also chose a low-rank adventurer like Ryu, because taking his life would not have made much of a difference to anyone. The whole plan makes sense now, but Rora is still unable to believe that she was the actual person used as bait. Ryu admits that he did not expect such a plan, because he thought he was the prime target. Even Leone says that she mistook herself to be a target, but feels that she could have been chosen as the bait if she was a few years younger. Despite solving the case, Ryu still doesn't get why Mihail chose to chase after him and his team even after knowing that Rora was not there with them. It turns out that Sarah still matched half the description because she's a teenager, so the knights had just assumed that she could have been the illegitimate child. However, our hero still expects better from the knight leader than to chase after the wrong people. Mihail can't take the insults any longer, and just says that Sarah could have been wearing a wig to cover her blonde hair, so he had to take the chance. On top of that, the travel route from Myas to Rhodes, Syria was just too good to be true, so he couldn't help himself. Of course, this is where it all went wrong because the knight leader allowed himself to get deceived by the noble. Ryu is not shy to mock Mihail for his mistake, but Balls has one more question to ask. If the whole plan was to fool the knights, then what was the need to use Messara and his merchants in all this? It turns out that the fat man was supposed to take care of the knights and gain favor with the nobles, probably even earning a reward for his efforts. Leone gets upset upon learning this, because it only goes on to show how sly Vals is as a guild master. Ryu breathes a sigh of relief for having figured everything out, but he still has work to do. Mihail is just sulking in the corner, so our hero tells him not to cry over spilled milk. He goes on to tell the knight leader that they're somewhat in similar situations. Sure, Mihail was tricked by the nobles, but Ryu is in a pretty tough spot as well, considering he's a wanted man whose face is known by Princess Sheldon. So, our hero proposes to work together with Mihail, which comes as a shock to the knight leader. With this, the mystery of the witch and the merchants finally comes to an end, and we move to the kingdom of Rhodes, Syria. Princess Lupis has arrived in her giant castle, and we see Mihail coming back to her. However, since he and his knights have been humiliated, all they can do is bow down to their princess in shame. Lupis asks Mihail to lift his head, and she says that she already knows what happened because she was informed of it by Maltina. However, instead of being sweet or cute, she says it's too bad that Mihail failed his mission. It turns out that our hero and his girls are also present here, and he feels something bad about to happen if this is how the princess is feeling. Of course, we need to understand how this happened in the first place, so it's time for another flashback. It's the night after Mihail and his men were beaten, and everyone is at the camping site. Suddenly, the knight leader screams that it's not right to mock his honor, and it leads to a commotion. Ryu comes to see what's going on, so Rora tells him that Mihail and Leone are having a bit of an argument. The lion girl is not someone who's just going to sit back and listen to a knight scold her, so she calls him out for trying to end her and the team. Mihail feels guilty, but maintains that he did not have any other choice. Ryu is not too thrilled to see this chat because he knows there's no way Leone and Mihail will get along. One is a mercenary who only cares about money and cash, while the other is a knight who only looks at serving his princess for the kingdom's growth. Leone decides to mock Mihail further by saying that all knights are just muscle brains. The knight leader doesn't take to this kindly, so he orders the lion girl to say sorry right now. Even Balls thinks that his mistress is being too rough, but Rora asks Ryu what muscle brain means. Our hero takes this chance to educate his slave girl on the term, and she seems to like the fact that a muscle brain is a person who simply acts without thinking. Ryu does tap into the dark side once again as he gets excited while telling Rora that a muscle brain will do anything to get what he wants. He even says that it could be a good or a bad thing, but it's quite obvious that his intrusive thoughts are taking over, and he can only think of the bad things he wants to do to his slave girl. As expected, Rora has no idea of her master's shady intentions, and she simply repeats what he says with more passion. Keeping this in mind, Rora asks Sarah what she would do if she were to become someone else's slave against her will. Of course, Sarah has the same answer any sister would have, which is that she would save Rora at all costs, and would even take the life of the man who's trying to do lewd things with her. Now, we come back to the present where Princess Lupis tells Mihail that she knows he failed his mission. Of course, her not being pleased with it makes Ryu a bit concerned, because he didn't expect the princess to speak this way. Rora wants to say something to her master while bending, but he tells her that she needs to speak with her mouth shut. Rora does as he says, and proceeds to ask him what he thinks of the situation. Princess Lupis is right in front of Ryu, so he carefully responds by saying they're in a tricky spot right now, but knowing that isn't going to help their case. It's time for our hero to use his brains again, so he takes a look at the princess and comes up with an analysis. Since she used the word mission, it seems that she knew Mihail was going with his men to assassinate an innocent young girl. If word got out that a princess was out to get another princess, then it would not look good for the kingdom. The worst case scenario for Ryu right now is that Lupis might not want anyone to talk about her involvement in the crime, so she could just take everyone's lives right now, including our hero as well. Now, his eyes fall on a night girl and wonders if she is Miltina. If that's the case, then Miltina is a very stupid girl because she has just spoken ill against Mihail, who is Princess Lupis' most loyal subject. To expose someone like him during such a tough time would be a massive mistake, so it may be that Miltina has some evil plans of her own. Lupis goes on to say that the failure of the mission has led to many knights losing their lives. This is true, and the worst part is that Ryu and Rora are responsible for taking those lives without mercy. The princess goes on to tell Mihail that he is still alive despite being the captain of the troops. Of course, the captain always has to go down with his ship, so Lupis says that she will have no other choice but to execute Mihail for his actions. Ryu had feared something like this, but he never expected such a curvy princess to be so cold. Luckily, Lupis also mentions that the mission was actually a trap set by the nobles, so Mihail was merely deceived by it. Keeping that in mind, the princess decides to keep the execution on hold for now. Her decision leads to a lot of chatting and gossip amongst the common folk, but Ryu is not letting his guard down. Lupis asks Mihail if there's anything he'd like to do with his new chance, and he promises that he will never do such a thing ever again in his life. Of course, it's not just Mihail who's being spared here, but also Ryu and his girls. Sarah and Rora speak to each other using telepathy and communicate what has just happened over here. All seems well to the common folk, but our hero is not going to let the princess off so easily. Ryu notes that Lupis did not share any information about the actual mission and its specifics. Instead, she only focused on the part where her knights lost due to the cheap tricks of the nobles. What Ryu can figure from this behavior is that the princess prefers personal gain to regulations, which is what he's looking for in an ally. Basically, Ryu has faith in the princess to be able to make such decisions, because that's what a royal ruler is all about. With the failed mission out of the way, Lupis decides to change the topic to something more relevant and looks at Rora. Her curvy body can even make girls have intrusive thoughts. But Lupis keeps her hands to herself and asks the slave girl if she is indeed the illegitimate child of her father. Rora stands up as per the princess's commands and she agrees with what Lupis is saying. Ryu watches on with caution as Rora confirms her name to the princess. However, she goes on to reveal that her family name is Malfist, and even introduces Sarah as her twin sister. Lupis becomes alert when she hears this name, because she's come across it before. As a matter of fact, the Malfist family was quite popular in the central continent a while back, but no one talks about them anymore. Miltina takes this chance to tell her princess that the illegitimate child doesn't have a sister. Lupis then takes a good look at both Rora and Sarah to assess if they really are sisters. That doesn't take long since they're twins, so the princess is convinced. Now that her place in the throne is secure, Lupis says that she would like to know more about the slave girls. However, they will have to wait till another time, because the princess leaves the scene. She also allows Ryu and his team to stay at the castle and enjoy themselves. Our hero can finally rest for a bit as we are taken to the royal dining room in the castle. It's a lavish space and Ryu is a bit overwhelmed by the wealth around him. Of course, he's getting treated very nicely. And he even gets a giant treasure, so he asks Lupis what this is all about. The princess simply asks him to consider it an apology for getting him caught up in the trouble of her kingdom's internal conflict. The treasure does look valuable, but this is not what our hero has come here for. He tells Lupis that he's already told Mihail what he wants. This makes Lupis switch to a more serious tone, because Ryu wants to join her army. She says that she needs more time to think about this, but our hero wonders if she's just telling him to take the treasure and leave. Of course, this is not what the princess meant, but Ryu openly tells her that he's her best bet to get the throne. After all, her chances of becoming the new queen are pretty much zero after what the nobles have been doing. Our hero doesn't like to mix words, but Miltina gets triggered by what he says and threatens him with her sword for mocking her princess. Ryu is not affected by this because he can easily rip her apart if he wants to. Miltina calls our hero a commoner and proceeds to speak rudely just because he said the truth to Lupis. The princess knows that Ryu is right, so she asks Miltina to put her sword away. She is shocked by this, but Lupis tells her that she still owes Ryu for what he's done. With that, Miltina puts her sword away and Ryu gives a sly smile while his slave girls also breathe a sigh of relief. Now that the drama is over, Lupis asks our hero to continue with his speech. Ryu goes on to say that he and his slave girls would be a great addition to her side, so the princess asks what he can do for her. He simply says that he can bring her victory, and it impresses Lupis as well as Maltina. The princess commends our hero's confidence and hopes that he can live up to his words. Ryu tries to act cool by sipping on tea and saying that he can even prove his merit to her. With that, Lupis decides to give in to Ryu's offer and she takes him into her army. Sarah is amazed by her master's skills, but Rora asks her if she's been listening to what Ryu has been talking about. Sarah grabs the treasure and says that they will need some funds to help the princess claim her throne. That's exactly what Lupis wanted to say, and she already finds Ryu reliable. Our hero goes back to his room feeling like a boss, but things are about to get much better for him because Leonie is waiting for him in his bed. She's had a few drinks, so it looks like she wants to give him a bit of heaven on earth. Rora and Sarah can't bear to look at Leonie in her shady clothes, but she says that the reason she needed some royal wine was because she was worried for Ryu. After all, if he would have been put in prison, then Leonie would have been next on the line. Luckily, the royal wine hits her sweet spot, so she could breathe easy. Balls is also present with Leonie, and he tells Ryu that she was eagerly waiting for him. Of course, this makes Leonie blush, so she tells Balls not to say such things to the man she likes. Our hero thanks the lion girl for believing in him, but his words make her shy, so she tries to change the topic. She also tells Ryu to stop talking to her in such formal terms because she wants him to look at her with intrusive thoughts. She says that they're comrades, so he should be more open with her. Upon hearing this, Ryu decides to ask something from Leonie, but it's not what she's hoping for. He needs to hire a team of mercenaries, and that too from her Crimson Lion gang. Ryu needs about 100 people for the job, but that's a huge ask even for someone like Leonie. She says that the fighters will cost him around 300 gold coins because he will also have to pay for supplies. So Sarah brings out the treasure trophy. It might be valuable, but the problem is that Leonie can only accept hard cash. After all, she would not want to leave any traces around. Sarah gets shocked by such an open rejection, but Ryu understands what Leonie is saying. He tells her that Rora will help him gather the money by the next day, so she should try to gather the mercenaries as soon as she can. The lion girl is surprised to hear how quickly Ryu wants to act, but Balls is ready to raise a toast to this deal. With that, everyone in the room takes a sip and they enjoy a nice night with each other. Meanwhile, at the imperial capital, we see Sato talking to Noble, who says it's his time to leave the capital. Sato is confused by this, but the noble says that he needs to decide the fate of Rhodes Syria as soon as possible. Now, at another fancy castle, we see the feudal lord, Count Alan, having a fun time with Ryu. He commends our hero for his amazing skills even though he is so young in terms of age. With Alan is another feudal lord named Count Ethan, who feels the same way about Ryu. Maltina comes to the scene and is shocked to see the two lords having a gala wine and dine session with our hero. She cannot believe that the lords would drink so much with the new Solider, but Alan offers her a spot to join them as well. It also looks like Alan and Ethan had placed a bet on when Maltina would come to the table, and Alan has just won a bottle of wine. The night girl has no idea how this started in the first place, but she also wants to know why Ryu is dressed in such a funny way. Maltina is not pleased by Ryu's fun nature, especially because she had received a note saying that she was summoned to Alan's castle. She came running to the table, but only found the men having a good time. Maltina wants to act serious, but Ryu's slave girls check her out from behind. She wants to know the meaning of this, but Rora and Sarah simply smile at her. Bettina wants to know why Ryu is engaging in fun when he has been tasked with something important. The princess is relying on him for his skills, so he shouldn't be drinking with feudal lords. Alan takes this chance to tell Maltina that he and Ethan have decided to support Lupis during this battle. The night girl can't believe her ears, but that's when we realize that Ryu was planning this right from the start. Maltina knows that this is a big deal because both Alan and Ethan have always chosen to stay neutral when it came to choosing the knights or the nobles. Now that they're on her side, she screams in joy and asks them if they have finally seen the justice behind Lupis' action. Of course, the night girl messes up the whole vibe with her words and makes the men sober down. Alan tells her that he spoke too soon, and even Ethan states that Maltina's attitude is making him lose his buzz. Maltina gets worried and asks Ryu why the feudal lords are changing their minds. She thinks that Ryu convinced the lords to support the rightful heir to the throne, but our hero tells her he's not a fool to make such a mistake. Instead, Alan and Ethan have agreed to the noble faction's request to stay on the sidelines. However, in exchange for this, they have been given more land and more positions as ministers. Maltina has not heard of anything like this, so she wonders how Ryu was able to get a hold of this information. Of course, Ryu did spare Mesara's life, so he's his informant within the noble faction. He was able to use this information to convince both Alan and Ethan to serve under Princess Lupi's direct command. It's a highly impressive feat, but Ryu still asks Miltina if it's fine to do that. She says yes and is also willing to use her own soldiers for the feudal lords. However, Miltina can't use her brains, so she asks if the feudal lords want to be guards of honor since they're serving directly under the princess. Also, by doing this, Alan and Ethan would need to go to the front line to prove their loyalty. Of course, this is not to be taken literally, which is why Ryu calls the night girl a musclehead and mocks her intelligence as well. Since he's from Japan, Ryu knows how much of an honor it is to join the royal guard. However, Ethan and Alan have agreed to be guards of honor, so they are not needed on the battlefield. It's actually a sweet deal for the feudal lords because they won't be doing much at all. Alan takes this chance to explain to Miltina that she might value the battlefield because she's a knight. However, people like Alan and Ethan think differently, as also rightly pointed out by Ryu. For lords to take part in a battle would be bad news for them. This is because they don't get any rewards or supplies for their efforts. The simple gratitude of the princess will not be enough for them, especially because their own people will be on the battlefield. Our hero then explains to Miltina that she should not forget this is a civil war. The lords will want to avoid their towns getting robbed in the middle of the battle as well. So, by being under the direct command of the princess, the lords will be able to receive a reward for their efforts. Ethan confirms with Ryu that neither he nor Alan will be affiliated with any military authority. And then the men shake hands to finalize the deal. However, the night girl Miltina still wants to know why there is a need to not get involved with General Hadran. There are a lot of questions to be answered, but Sarah is unable to contain her excitement because of the giant vase that has been given to Ryu as a reward for his efforts. Sarah gets a bit too comfortable and goes on to say that it's a good thing she doesn't have to give up the vase to get the lords on her master's side. Of course, this leads to an awkward moment, but there's no harm done. Now, we move to the nighttime where a cute girl in a pretty dress meets Ryu alone in his room. Our hero is shocked to see her, but the dress gets his intrusive thoughts running, so he asks who she is. It turns out that the girl is actually Miltina, who has been forced to dress like an actual girl by Ryu's slave girls. Even Alan and Ethan wanted Miltina to look cute, so they told their maids to give her a spicy outfit. Miltina is upset with Ryu for not being able to recognize her, but our hero couldn't care less. Miltina wonders what Ryu is teaching his slave girls, because he could have shady intentions for them, but our hero turns it around on her and says sorry. He goes on to say that Rora and Sarah are like his family, so Miltina decides to change the topic before she gets too emotional. Anyway, she wants to discuss what just happened with the feudal lords, so she asks Ryu if he made this deal in order to create a third pillar of power by using the neutral parties. As a matter of fact, such a deal has been made before where a country is split into 3 groups, but Ryu reassures Miltina that they are not on such a level yet. After all, it's hard to figure out what General Hadram has in mind for the princess as well. We learn that he is the commander-in-chief of the chivalric order and has pledged his allegiance to Lupi's, but you never know what his true intentions might be. It could be that General Hadram is simply showing support to the princess in order to gain full control of the military's authority, which will not be a good thing if he turns out to be evil. Ryu decides to use his brain power once again and says that Hadram might not be as obedient as the princess would like him to be, because the way she dealt with Mihail earlier was an indicator of some friction. Miltina agrees that even if they do win against the noble faction with General Hadram, they will still need to be careful. This was exactly the reason why Ryu decided to strike his deal with the feudal lords. And he even explains this to Alan, who assures him that he will gather all the neutral lords and have them commit to Princess Lupi's. Despite such a successful mission, there are still a few missing pieces for our hero. He might have gotten around 2,000 soldiers from the feudal lords, but he will need another 2,000 soldiers from somewhere else. It's either this, or Ryu will need to get a general who is on the same level as Hadram. Lord Ethan takes this as his cue to enter, and he says that he has someone who fits into that description. Alan realizes who he's talking about and is quite happy about it, because the person is a cute girl named Alina, who was the previous commander-in-chief before Hadram. Ryu is interested now, so he asks if Alina is from a royal family, but Alan says that she's actually from common blood. Our hero is shocked to see the amount of respect that Alan and Ethan are showing to Alina, mainly because she comes from a common family and also the fact that she is a woman. Ethan explains that he and Alan value Alina because she has achieved a lot during her time in this world. She has great martial arts skills along with a strong sense of dignity, both of which have allowed her to rise from the rank of a commoner and attain the title of a general. However, after almost becoming a divine being, Alina abruptly announced her retirement and surprised everyone. Alan even goes on to say that getting Alina on their side will be like getting 1,000 soldiers. On top of that, if the other lords hear about Alina joining the princess, then they will also side with Lupi's. However, Meltina brings up the fact that there is some kind of feud between Alina and General Hadram which could lead to some problems, especially since Hadram is currently serving Lupi's. It might be hard for Alina to join forces with Ryo if he is with Hadram, so he asks if the feud has anything to do with Alina suddenly retiring out of the blue. Alan says that Ryo is right, and goes on to talk about a rumor that our hero would have definitely heard about if he was a citizen of this kingdom. It turns out that General Hadram had stolen Alina's position by force because he wanted to have all the power. In order to do this, he had taken her husband and daughter as his hostage, so that Alina would simply give in to his demands without a fight. It's a rather shocking twist. And now we go to the suburbs of Rhodes, Syria. This place happens to be Alina's home, and she is told by her maid that she has guests. Alina has not had any guests in a long time, so she is more than happy to meet with them. The guests turn out to be Ryo and Meltina, and Alina greets them with a smile. Meltina is nervous around her, but Ryo thinks that Alina is a frugal woman. Meltina decides to introduce herself and is quite shy as she mentions that she is the samurai knight girl of Princess Lupi. She bows down with intense passion and tells Alina that it is an honor for her to meet her. Alina is pleased by Meltina and her flattery, and then she moves on to Ryo. After he reveals his name, Alina becomes cautious because she has heard of his name before. Ryo wants to know how he's become so famous, and he gets his answer when Alina says that he has caught the princess's attention. Our hero is impressed to see how Alina has kept herself informed even after retiring from her post. He calls her the White God of War and goes on to praise her for remaining radiant even though she is not in service. Of course, Alina doesn't care for such titles because they are only useful in stroking one's ego. She takes a seat and asks the duo why they are here to see her today. Ryo does not waste any time and gets straight to the point by asking her to help Princess Lupi's in the war. Alina's face changes its tone, so Meltina tells our hero not to be so sudden with his words. Alina confirms if Ryo is asking her to join the Knights faction because she is not keen on doing so. She doesn't hate the Knights, but she doesn't want to join Hadram in anything either. She even goes on to talk about the rumor regarding what Hadram had done with her husband and daughter, but this does not stop Ryo from working his magic. He tells Alina that he knows it all, which is why he is asking her to join the princess as her personal advisor. Alina becomes joyful and says that it would be a great honor for her to become the princess's guardian. However, since she was the knight of the late king, she is unable to accept this offer. Alina also brings up the point of the illegitimate child who might lay a claim to throne, but this only angers Meltina. She tries to convince Alina that Lupi's is the only rightful heir to the throne and she can vouch for the princess because she is very close to her. Ryo doesn't want the knight girl to mess things up, so he tells her to calm down. After all, to be a king means that you should have a lot more than a simple personality. Meltina wonders whose side Ryo is on, so he puts her in her place by speaking facts. The truth of the matter is that Alina does not care about fame or legitimacy when it comes to the throne. Rather, it is about certain conditions that need to be in place for the White God of War to mark her return. Alina is impressed by our hero and she asks him to guess the conditions she is willing to work under. Meltina becomes a bit too excited upon hearing this, but Ryo can't have her messing up his plans, so he asks her to wait outside while he and Alina have a private chat with each other. The knight girl is not too keen to leave Ryo alone with Alina, but he reassures her that she can trust him. With that, Meltina leaves the room, and now it's up to Ryo to seal the deal with Alina. She tells him that he's quite gentle when compared to what she's heard about him. Ryo doesn't have time for silly games, so he tells Alina that she could have simply stated her conditions right at the start, but she didn't do this. It might be because she does not want the public to know of her conditions. And our hero has once again guessed it right. Alina is relieved to be able to speak openly now, so Ryo mentions the feud between her and General Hadram. He mentions the part where her husband and daughter were kidnapped by Hadram. But Alina reveals that this was just what the general public had been led to believe. The reality was that one day, Alina came home only to see her husband's head on the stairs, which means that he was ended by Hadram. Alina was shocked by this sight. And there was a letter as well, which said that the culprit has her daughter, and he will only let her go if Alina was to retire from being a night girl. This was obviously a horrific sight for Alina, but at the same time, she had no choice but to accept the condition. The worst part was that Alina came from a commoner family, which meant that she would normally have a lot of enemies. Ryo asks her if she had any evidence to prove what Hadram did, but she didn't want to take any risks, especially with her daughter's life on the line. With that thought in mind, she immediately retired from her knight position and searched for a while, but was only able to identify the culprit after a long time. Of course, this evil man turned out to be General Hadram, and now it all makes sense to Ryo. Alina says that Ryo has to promise her that he will take revenge on Hadram for her, and he agrees to it. Our hero goes to Meltina and reveals that Alina is now on their side, which makes her very happy. She knows that Princess Lupi's will be very pleased to hear this, but something seems to be up with Ryo. Meltina asks him if there's a problem because he has a very sad look on his face. He says that Alina might have agreed to team up with him and the princess, but he has learned something horrible from her. It turns out that he had asked Alina if her daughter was doing well, but she went on to reveal that it didn't end well for her. One of Alina's assistants managed to get some information on her daughter, but learned that she was sold as a slave to some shady men. After some horrible experiences, she was disposed of in the worst possible way. This was truly devastating for our hero to hear, which is why he looks so sad right now. As he leaves the mansion with Meltina, Alina looks at him from her window and says that he's quite a lovely young man. Her maid feels that Ryu looks a lot older than his age. But that's not the point here. Our hero could not hold back his tears after learning what happened to Alina's poor daughter, so she can sense that he is truly a noble man. On top of that, his energy gives off the vibe that he is filled with strength and kindness, so he will make sure to avenge Alina. The White God of War even goes on to say that Ryu is the lamp who will finally light up her soul from the depths of despair. Our hero is going to be the man who will bring justice to Alina, no matter what the cost may be. Ryu decides to call back on the memory of his sensei telling him about the Chinese emperor, Li Kuangyi. We even see a chapter from his life where he is talking to one of his men about using their regular soldiers to conquer a new enemy. General Li was known very well for his ability to capture and defeat troops even when he was using weak men, so it made him a legend in the modern world. Ryu is now reading the war script from the Song Dynasty in its original text, so he wonders if it truly is a privilege to be summoned into this fantasy world. Suddenly, he is interrupted when Rora asks him if he's done with his reading. We see that Ryu was resting his head on Rora's lap and he was so comfortable in her thick thighs that he had forgotten she is not his pillow. Our hero says sorry for letting his intrusive thoughts take over, but Rora is fine with this. As a matter of fact, it is her duty as his slave to offer him comfort whenever he needs it. Of course, it only awakens Ryu's shady side, so we switch to the well outside where Rora is now collecting some water. She thinks about what her master said because he had apologized even though he is free to use her as he pleases. Rora starts to have a fantasy in her head. But then she suddenly gets scared by Leone as part of a prank. The lion girl goes on to mock Rora for being so occupied that her back was full of openings for an attack. Rora blushes and says that it's not nice to sneak up on her like this, but Leone says that she couldn't help herself since the slave girl was in some fantasy land. Leone is actually interested in Ryu, so she asks where he might be. Rora says that her master has gone to talk with the mercenaries about some plan of his, but Leone doesn't want to be a part of that chat. Rora is shocked to hear this, but Leone says that she is the one who brought the mercenaries, so she will leave the talking to Balls. Rora gets what she means, and thanks the lion girl for getting so many people, even when she did not have the means to communicate with them. Leone says that she has a lot of people in her network, so it was not hard for her to get the job done. Of course, the truth is that Princess Lupis has to win the war at any cost, so this is the best that Leone can do for Ryu. She is not equipped to do a lot of talking, which is why she has chosen to stay out of the discussion. The lion girl then jokes about the knights complaining, since their training ground has now been taken over by the mercenaries. Now, Leone asks Rora for her better half, so she assumes it's her master. She says that Ryu might also be looking for books covering topics from other worlds. But if it's Sarah that Leone is talking about, then she has gone to run some errands. Leone worries that Sarah should not be left alone, because she could end up doing hilarious things if she is not attended to. However, Rora is sure that her sister can handle herself with some simple chores. After all, she believes that Sarah is a lot more proper than she is. Leone takes this as a chance to joke with Rora, so asks her if she is free and jobless. The slave girl gets upset upon hearing this, so she shows Leone that she's getting water even as they're speaking. However, Leone is surprised to see this because Rora is a battle slave. She can simply ask others to do this job for her, so the lion girl wants to know why Rora is putting in the effort. She goes on to explain that since she is the slave of a man like Ryu, she is able to cope with any request to the best of her abilities. Leone wonders if our hero had ordered Rora to do this for him, but she says no. The lion girl was expecting a response like this because Ryu is not the type of boy to make his slave girls do so much work. Rora goes on to say that her master is very kind and gentle to her and Sarah, although he is absolutely ruthless when it comes to the enemy. Leone agrees that Ryu is a gentle boy, especially when it comes to his cute slave girls. This makes Rora blush, so she tries to hide her feelings, but Leone is able to spot that the slave girl has already noticed why her master is so nice to her. Of course, Rora does not want Leone to say such weird things because it makes her shy, but the lion girl says that it's nice to be young and have such a handsome master. She feels jealous of Rora and Sarah, but the slave girl says that it's not as rosy as it seems. Leone doesn't follow what she's saying, so Rora explains that it's hard for her to deal with Ryu's behavior. She even goes on to say that her master doesn't trust her or Sarah, which is why he is so nice to them. Rora has tears in her eyes, so Leone consoles her since she was the one who was teasing her in the first place. Things get a bit weird when Rora says that she wants her master to treat her like a naughty cow. Leone has no idea what this means. But there's another problem to deal with as Sarah has come back from her chores. She sees her sister crying, and it makes her angry beyond comprehension. Leone panics and tries to defend herself by saying it was a simple case of misunderstanding. But Rora is surprised to see Sarah like this. She asks if something is wrong, and that's when Sarah remembers why she came here. She goes on to say that Ryu is in danger of meeting his end, which shocks both Rora as well as Leone. It's at this very moment that we get to see Ryu facing off against an overpowered fighter who is using all his strength to fight him. The fighter uses his finisher move and Ryu is luckily able to dodge it because the move ends up splitting the ground open like a spider web. The other mercenaries are in shock and disbelief to see such power. But we learn from Sarah that this man is a rank mercenary who is also an expert in martial arts. The fighter tells our hero that he does not want to attack him in his sleep, so it's good that they're fighting in public right now. He basically wants to duel with Ryu. But the girls are not able to understand why he would want to do such a thing. Rora panics for her master, but Leone reminds her that Ryu is an amazing fighter too, so she should not worry so much for him. Both Rora and Sarah act cute and say that they don't want anything to happen to their sweet master, so Leone gets that they are being emotional. The girls pray for Ryu's safety, and then we see the rank fighter taunting our hero for not being able to use magic. He goes on a rampage while the others watch on with anxious anticipation. The fighter continues to mock Ryu for not being able to do anything without his slave girls, especially because he is a rank F adventurer. The fighter uses another finisher move to tear the ground open, but Ryu is able to dodge it with ease. Our hero does not get scared so easily, as he tells the fighter that his martial arts style is just flashy without any substance. The fighter tells Ryu not to complain too much about him, but our hero explains that he's not using his skills the right way. This takes the fighter by surprise, especially when Ryu tells him that he's wasting his martial arts by focusing too much on power. It's time for our hero to do the teasing as he makes fun of the fighter's nickname by calling him a crying baby. He messes up the name one more time and it triggers the fighter into charging at him. Of course, this is what Ryu wanted in the first place, and he makes use of this advantage by deflecting the fighter's attack. He then proceeds to grab his body and smash him to the ground with complete ease, much to the shock of everyone watching the duel. They are unable to believe what they have just seen. And even the rank fighter can't move from his position due to the sheer skill of his opponent. Ryu acts cool about the whole thing and simply says that what he has used is a simple technique that he had learnt back when he was in Japan. Rora and Sarah come to the scene and call out to their master, but the slave girls are stopped by Balls. They ask him to let them through, but he says that he can't do this since there is a duel going on between two warriors. The crowd goes wild from behind, so Balls says that he can't give special treatment to the slave girls. Leone shows up from behind and says sorry to Balls for not being able to keep Rora and Sarah in check. This shocks the slave girls because they had no idea that Leone knew about the duel. Anyway, it's time to go back to the fight and we see the rank warrior finally being able to get up. He is impressed that Ryu was able to use such a neat technique, but mentions that he also has a few tricks up his sleeve. Our hero doesn't care for words, so he tells the fighter to prove it with his actions. With that, the fighter strikes a pose, and Ryu is able to identify it as the pine needle stance. The fighter mocks Ryu by saying he is now using a move from another world, and that too, the fighting style happens to be karate. The rank warrior tells our hero that he is now able to copy his moves, so Rora and Sarah begin to worry for him. Ryu realizes that his slave girls are watching, so he decides to put on a show for them. Of course, he is also offended by the fact that he and his sensei are being compared with a basic fighter, so he tells him to know his place. As expected, this riles up the fighter, so he lashes out at Ryu with all his might. This makes no difference at all to our hero, as he manages to counter him with ease and even goes on to put up a splendid display of martial arts. The crowd is in absolute disbelief as Ryu lifts the warrior once again and slams him to the ground as if he's a puny insect. Such a move even makes Balls applaud our hero. And with his finisher move, Ryu is announced as the winner of the duel. Everyone in the crowd goes crazy for him, but our hero tells Balls that he might have ended the rank of warrior. He asks him to take care of his opponent, but then he also has to deal with his slave girls, both of whom are looking at him with disdain. They want to know the meaning of this, so Ryu says sorry for leading them on. He reveals that he had received some intel on an assassin from the nobles mixing in with the mercenaries as a spy. Our hero figured that it would be best to defeat him in a duel, so he had Leone set up the whole thing. Of course, the lion girl was more than happy to do this because she has made a lot of money in the process. She is a smart woman for sure, but it's also a good thing for Ryu to have beaten such a strong assassin. However, the problem here is that Rora and Sarah are upset because they wanted to get rid of the assassin for their master. Ryu knew they would say something like that, which was why he decided to keep it a secret from them in the first place. Leone adds that this was the best way to establish dominance amongst the other mercenaries. After all, now that Ryu has beaten the A-rank fighter, everyone is talking about him. The lion girl then tells Rora that she needs to trust her master because he is way more powerful than she can ever imagine. The slave girl looks at Ryu as he chills with the other people and she has dreamy eyes. Since she had said all those weird things about wanting to be treated like a naughty cow, Rora says sorry to Leone for creeping her out. The lion girl is fine with it, and even promises to keep that as a secret between the girls. Rora is still feeling bad, so Leone decides to tell her a secret about her master. She says that Ryu had made a resolution that he wants both Rora and Sarah to lead happy lives even if he is no more. He has said this way too many times to Leone, and has even mentioned that he does not want to use the girls as an excuse for him to have an easy life. Our hero sees the lion girl talking to his slave girls, so he tells her not to reveal any secrets. Leone then tells Rora and Sarah that they are both loved by their master, so they should be happy. However, Rora tells Leone that she should not lie because after all both Rora and Sarah are slaves, so they don't need to be loved. The lion girl doesn't understand this logic, but then she and Rora are cut short by Ryu when he reminds them that it's time for the war to start. He calls Rora over to his side, and she happily follows after him because she will do whatever he wants her to. Now, it's time for us to move to a very important person for some context. We see a young girl who tells us that she was an orphan, but due to the events on one certain day, she has become a princess. This girl's name is Radine, and it looks like she is the illegitimate child of the late king. However, Radine herself would like to know who she is, especially as we see her being surrounded by some noble. The truth of the matter is that the kingdom is going to start a war just because of her. Now, we go back to the royal castle where we see a night boy bowing down to Alina. He says that his grandpa Frank was very concerned about Alina, especially after the horrible losses she had to endure. This is why he has come here to offer himself as her new guardian knight. Ryu does not know who this man is, so he asks Alina for some content. She explains that the night boy is the grandchild of a man named Frank Morrigan, who was her assistant knight back when she was the White God of War. The night boy is also from a commoner family, just like Alina, which is why she relates to him. The night boy is so skilled that even Alina would not be able to defeat him in her current form. There's also the fact that the night boy is handsome, so she makes it known to Ryu, who really doesn't have much to say about it. Now, we see the feudal lords Alan and Ethan, both of whom reveal that the news of Alina joining the princess has had a good effect on our hero's team. A lot of the neutral lords are now keen on serving Lupies, so Alan and Ethan have become busy with all the requests that are coming their way. Alan even believes that some of the people working under Hadram might just flip over and serve under Alina directly rather than the general. He then jokes about being referred by Alina, whereas it is actually Ethan who has received that honor. The feudal lords joke with each other, but the White God of War is not impressed. On top of that, Ryu did not expect so many people to join his side, which is actually a problem. After all, General Hadram is still commanding his army for the princess, so he would not want it to become so big that it affects the overall plan. There are a lot of things being said about Hadram, and none of them are nice. He is known to be cruel and narrow in his thought, which means that he was never popular from the start. Our hero fears that these rising numbers might push Hadram into action, but nothing can be done about it now. Since the army strength can't be reduced, Ryu has to take matters into his own hands. After all, the arrangement is for everyone to be treated as Imperial Guards, so they are not like a regular army. Another big difference between Ryu's army and General Hadram is the severe lack of funds from our hero's side. Now, Maltina rushes into the room with some very bad news. The men in the room want to know what has happened, and that's when she reveals that General Hadram has now joined the nobles faction. It is a rather surprising turn of events and comes as a huge shock to everyone, especially Alan and Ethan. The feudal lords can't make sense of this situation because Hadram and Val have bad blood between them. Maltina doesn't have an answer for that, but she does know that Hadram's army has set foot into the nobles faction. Mihail wonders if this is just an exercise to assess the bandits around the area, but the night girl confirms that the troops just randomly joined the noble faction without any hesitation. Mihail gets upset because it is clear that Hadram has betrayed them all. Mihail was the one who worried that using the main army for this task was a huge risk, and now his worst fears have come true. He is angry with Hadram for being so shameless, but Alina tells him that it can't be helped. After all, General Hadram is a great fighter, and would always pull out the most effective moves to win. There's not much that can be done about this, so the White God of War suggests holding a war council in front of Lupies the next morning. Ryu is also affected by this news, and it makes him think about a similar situation that had happened in Earth's history. He feels that the current scene is like when Emperors Sun Quan and Cao Cao have joined forces right before the Battle of Red Cliff. The fact that Vol from the Noble faction and Hadram from the Knight faction have joined forces just seems too good to be true, especially with the timing. On top of that, how are these people going to feed so many soldiers? This gets Ryu thinking, and he uses his brain power to come up with the theory that there could be a third pillar who is pulling all the strings behind the scenes. Alina is amazed by our hero's intellect and she applauds him for being so quick on the uptake. As a matter of fact, she is quite calm in this scenario, but that should be expected from someone who has such a legacy. She simply says that she will go when her time will come, and she feels that it's going to come soon, so there's no need to worry about it for now. Ryu jokes with her because it would be quite an issue if Alina were to be ended at such a crucial time. Even so, Alina says that the current situation is not good for them at all. She wonders if this is going to be a drawn-out war, because she would want to solve their logistics problem. It can actually be sorted if they just raid Hadram's supplies, and Ryu agrees with her. He also feels that a drawn-out war would not be the worst thing for them, but there is something that frightens him the most. Alina tries to complete his sentence by saying she could pass away tomorrow due to natural causes. However, that is not at all what Ryu would want to say. He asks her to cut him some slack because his actual fear is if Alina were to abandon him in the middle of the war. The White God of War simply jokes and says that she doesn't like men who give her false hope. Ryu asks Alina to promise him one thing if they win this war, but we don't get to hear what he asks for. Now, we move to the next day as a war council is being held in front of Princess Lupi's. Our hero suggests using the mercenaries to attack the enemy forces, but Maltina gets angry and asks him if he's lost his mind. She says that they're up against 60,000 soldiers, and if they count Hadram's men as well, then it's not looking good for them at all. However, Ryu tells her to calm down, because there is no need to assume that they will be taking on the whole army by themselves. Basically, Ryu is planning to build a bridgehead over on the River Thebe, and Mihail sees the merit in it. Even though Vol and Hadram joining forces has become a huge headache for our hero, since they still have bad blood between them, it will not be easy for them to work together. The team can make use of this advantage and build a fortress on the front line. Since the enemy will need to cross the river to get to this side, the princess's army can set up the fortress there. If they can use the terrain well, then the fortress will also be indestructible. Mihail is extremely impressed by Ryu's genius plan, so he commends him for it. But our hero is actually impressed with Mihail for being able to understand his plan. After all, he had just assumed that Mihail would be a muscle brain man with no intelligence. However, he was wrong, so he tells Mihail that he's got it right. Even Alina thinks that the plan is very interesting. But she has a concern. She wants to know how Ryu is going to build the fortress in the first place. Even if the enemy forces are not in order, they will still do their best to make sure our hero won't be able to succeed in his strategy. Of course, Ryu already has another plan of action in place, so he asks Princess Lupi's for her permission to carry it out. She becomes a bit shy after hearing this, because she has no idea how to fight a war. The princess doesn't want so much pressure on her, so she decides to leave it all on Alina's hands. The White God of War is shocked by this, but not because of Lupi's, but rather because of Ryu. It seems as if our hero had already expected that the princess would hand over the command to Alina, which could have been the main reason why he got her over to his side. She has no choice but to tell the princess that Ryu has an amazing plan. She approves of it. At the same time, Alina tells Ryu not to get it twisted, because her decision is not based on whether she likes him or not. Basically, the reason this plan works for the kingdom is that even if it goes wrong, then the loss will only be Ryu's mercenary soldiers and no one else. She tells our hero to be careful and not to lose his life, so he smiles back at her and says he's going to succeed. Even though Alina appears to be strict, she does commend Ryu on having guts made of steel. Later, Ryu has a word with Leone and Balls regarding the plan, and the lion girl teases him by saying he loves to take risks. Balls does have a concern, which is that the soldiers will not be able to defend themselves from the enemy. There doesn't seem to be any plan in place for that, but Ryu says that he will need help to handle that department, specifically from Leone and Balls. We don't get to see what plan he has in mind, because now he is meeting with Rora and he comes across a new headache. The arrangements have been completed for the mercenary soldiers, but Rora suspects that there are some more rogues hiding in plain sight. This is just like the rank fighter from earlier, but this time there could be more than one spy. Rora doesn't know if these spies are strong enough to be assassins, so she suggests get rid of all of them. However, Ryu tells her to just let them swim around for now, because he might be able to use them as a trump card later on. He even thinks about doing some scam with them, but Balls worries that the spies could just attack Ryu while he's asleep. Our hero says that he's too strong to go in such a basic way, because he was trained by his sensei after all. Leone takes this as a chance to let her own intrusive thoughts take over, and she suggests that she should share a bed with our hero to ensure he is safe. Of course, she has her own shady intentions in mind. so the slave girls activate the dark side and tell her that there is no need to share a bed with their master. It's a funny situation that puts a smile on Ryu's face, but he knows that he has a huge task ahead of him. Now, we move to outside the royal capital of Xerius, where a strong army comes together. Leading this army is none other than our hero Ryu and his trusted companions. Everyone looks at Ryu as their new leader and place their complete faith in him. With that, our hero is ready to begin his plan of action, so he orders the army to begin with the plan. A few days pass by, after which Ryu and his army finally reach the southwest shore of the Thebe River. They kick off the fortress building exercise, and Mihail tells Ryu that he will lead his men to scout the area for any dangers. Our hero is fine with this, but he tells Mihail that he should retreat instantly if he sees any of the enemy forces. He knows that Mihail is a man of passion, so he asks him to only scout the area and do nothing else. Mihail agrees to restrict his activities to just that, and then he takes off with his men. Our hero realizes that Mihail has given him a lot of respect as the commander of the army, even though he is just a commoner boy. It makes him feel very happy because Mihail is showing the dignity of a knight who only wishes to protect his king. With that, he tells everyone else to continue with the preparations just as they had planned. It looks like a tiring mission, but Ryu doesn't back down from his duties, and neither do his men. Balls takes over some of the men as he reads out some orders to the first squad who will be using a magic spell. He reminds the men to chant their spells just like they were told, so that there won't be any trouble. The men have a strong look of intensity in their eyes as they begin chanting the spell with passion. They finally complete the process and launch an earth sync move. The ground moves instantly, and Balls is pleased with the way the first squad has done their duty. He allows them to rest for 15 minutes, and then he calls out the second squad to use their magic for the next round. Ryu shows up to ask Balls how the construction is going on, and he tells our hero that everything is going as per the schedule. Ryu is pleased to hear this and he applauds Balls for doing his job so well. He asks him to continue just like this, but even Balls tells Ryu that he is an amazing man. This is because the Earth Sync magic spell is considered to be a useless trick that is only good for digging things. Since it is so easy to use, most people consider it to be litter trash. However, Ryu has been able to use such a simple spell in such an effective manner, that too, for a war. Of course, there's nothing special about the spell in general, because it can't be used to attack a moving enemy. Also, the spell can be nullified with magic items, so it really was a stroke of genius for Ryu to use it first. Our hero says that he has to make the best possible use of the spell, so Balls make an odd expression on his face. Ryu wants to know what's the matter, but he says it's nothing important. He basically feels that our hero has not understood how valuable he really is. Anyway, Ryu has another urgent matter to deal with, so he asks Balls for the identification of a suspected spy. He confirms the same, because Sarah has been keeping a watch on this spy for a while, so Ryu needs to act fast. He's a bit shocked to learn that the spy is a cute girl, but he also feels a bit uneasy, probably because she reminds him of Sato from earlier. He wonders if this spy girl is from Shalvina's empire, but then he suspects something even more bizarre. Meanwhile, we check out Mihail and his men, who have laid their eyes on the enemy soldiers. There is no movement as of now, but the number of soldiers on the opposite side is believed to be around 5,000, with at least 2,000 being cavalrymen. Mihail is a bit worried because that's a lot of men to deal with. There might also be scouts from the enemy forces, so it's highly possible that General Hadram and the nobles are now aware of Ryu's plan to cross the river. The night boy from earlier panics upon hearing this, so he tells Mihail that they need to report back to Ryu as soon as possible. Mihail tells the night boy that he's doing well as a new guy, and now he plans to retreat from the scene with his men. However, it's at this very moment when one of the soldiers panics upon seeing someone in the enemy forces. Mikhail wants to know what's up, but the soldier is unable to express himself. Mikhail doesn't have time to play games, so he asks the soldier to hand over the viewing scope. However, what he sees through the scope is rather unpleasant, as it is a man named Kyle who has joined the noble faction. It looks like Kyle was on the princess's side earlier, but he has now betrayed her and joined the enemy. As expected, Mihail does not take too kindly to this and openly calls him a traitor. The other knights don't know what to do in this situation, because this is clearly big news. The night boy asks Mihail for the next plan of action, so he says that the others should retreat and report back to Ryu. However, as far as Mihail is concerned, he is going to pull out his sword and attack Kyle without mercy. Of course, this comes as a shock to the others, because this was not part of the plan. They don't want to leave their captain alone, but Mihail says that there's not much for them to do here. He simply says that he will take care of Kyle, because the traitor deserves to be punished for his crimes. The other knights are ordered to go back to Ryu, because he will need to know about this as soon as possible. With that, Mihail charges towards the enemy, even as his knights try to stop him from making such a huge mistake. Now, we move back to the site of construction, where Ryu is looking over everything. Suddenly, he becomes alert, so Rora asks him if all is well. Ryu reassures her that nothing is wrong, and he was just thinking about how far along they've come. With the fortress almost ready and good to go, our hero feels that they need to hurry up with the construction so that they can carry on with the rest of their plans. However, before he can move further, he hears cries of help from Balls. He looks rather worried, so Ryu asks him what's the matter. Someone has brought a message to the camp, so our hero wants to know what it is. Balls feels that it would be better for Ryu to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And then we see one of the night boys from Mihail's team. He is visibly tired and isn't looking too good, so Ryu wonders what has happened. He asks the night boy if he was serving under Mihail, and he confirms it, but with bad news. The night boy isn't able to stand straight, so Ryu orders him to keep it together. Our hero wants to know why only one boy has come back when Mihail had left with multiple soldiers for his scouting mission. The night boy agrees that he had gone with his leader as a team, but he is the only one who has made it back alive. Both Ryu and Balls can't believe what they're hearing, so the night boy explains that Mihail might have been taken down by the enemy. What's worse is that the other knights followed after him, and they have most likely been dealt with the same fate. Balls wants to confirm each and every word that the survivor is saying, because he wants to know if Mihail has actually been ended. The night boy says that Mihail could not control himself after seeing Kyle, so he charged at him with lethal intent. Ryu has no idea who Kyle is, so he asks for more context, but all the soldiers behind him seem to know that name, and even they start calling him a traitor. It makes Ryu wonder if Kyle is actually related to the knights. But there's no time to lose, so Balls asks the night boy for the number of enemy soldiers. He answers by saying that there are around 5,000 soldiers, but the number of purging warriors is still unknown. There is a lot to take in right now, but Ryu can't afford to lose any time. He quickly calls out to Leone and Balls and tells them to take 400 soldiers each. The plan is to have them guard the north and the south sides of the fortress, while Ryu will take center stage and guard the core with 600 soldiers. Balls and Leone are good to go, but the night boy asks our hero to forgive him because he and his men ended up going against his orders. Ryu doesn't want the night boy to feel bad, so he says that it wasn't his fault. After all, Mihail was the one who had given the order, so it was his fault. However, the night boy still feels bad about what happened because they were actually going to retreat till Mihail saw Kyle. This caused him to lose his temper as well as his mind, which is why our hero finds himself in a tricky spot right now. On top of that, the night boy feels that he should have tried to stop Mihail from making such a careless mistake, but instead, he chose to go with him and get wounded. He is ready to lay down his life for Princess Lupis, as was Mihail, but at the end of the day, nothing good has come from betraying Ryu's orders. Things become a little emotional now, because the night boy is taking his last few breaths at this point. He says that he always wanted to be like Mihail, but the chance has gone by with the fatal blow that was dealt to him. He takes out his medal and laments that he only has one of these, and it's going to stay that way during this life. Of course, Ryu doesn't get any of this, because it is not normal for someone to be thinking about medals when their life is about to end. Rora also becomes emotional as the night boy drops to the ground, pretty much facing his end. Ryu notices that there was no coherence between what he revealed earlier and what he said before passing away, so it feels like a wasted chance. The night boy's last words ask our hero to save Princess Lupis and make her the rightful ruler of Rhodes, Syria. He forces Ryu to make this promise to him, after which he breathes his last, and it makes our hero very emotional. He calls out to Balls and asks him for a spade to dig a hole in the ground. Balls is surprised to hear this, because the same thing can be done with an earth sink spell. However, Ryu says that he wants to dig a grave for the night boy in order to pay his last respects. After all, this man was one of his comrades, so he deserves that much at the very least. Of course, Ryu also has to take his position with Rora, but he asks her for some time so that he can get this done. She has no problem with this, and even Balls is amazed to see how kind Ryu is as a leader. The grave gets dug, and then our hero thinks about what the knight told him regarding the promise to make Princess Lupis the ruler of the kingdom. He then takes a look at the medal that the night boy was talking about, and wonders why he would bring that up during such a difficult time. However, he needs to get to work as soon as possible, because Rora has spotted the enemy soldiers coming in fast. The worst part is that there are 5,000 of these soldiers, and they're just within a kilometer of the fortress. It looks like a deadly war is going to begin, and Ryu needs to lead the way for his slave girls and the other soldiers as well. He proceeds to draw his sword and heads towards the battlefield, thinking about making good on his promise to the night boy. Of course, he will have to survive this attack if he can make that a reality. What's next for our hero? Will he be able to defeat so many soldiers and lead the way for his people? Or will his amazing plan turn out to be a failure? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 5. See you soon.